I want to move that table to
In compliance with Chapter 551, Open Meetings of the Texas Government Code, I call to order an information session of the Board of Trustees of the Austin Independent School District for Thursday, November 7th, 2024 at 6:06 p.m. A quorum of the board is physically present at AISD Central Office to conduct this meeting. This meeting is streaming live on AISD TV and Apple TV, and it's also being broadcast on cable channel 22 through Spectrum, Astound Broadband, and on channel 99 through AT&T Uverse. Closed captioning in English is available on these platforms for individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. So welcome, and thank you all so much for joining us. So next is an opportunity for the public to share comments with the board. This time allows speakers to comment publicly on any topic of their choosing, directly to the school board and superintendent. We have time for up to 60 speakers. As a reminder, the district continues to provide time during the regular voting meetings of the board to hear from the public about agenda items for consideration and vote. This is an opportunity for the board to take part in listening to our community. While we wish we could respond or provide feedback, we are required to limit our questions to requests for clarification or follow up directly with the administration. Members of the public wishing to participate in the public comment portion of our meeting call a dedicated AISD phone line in advance of the meeting to audio record their remarks. So tonight we have had, no callers who signed up to speak in person, but we had 6 who left a recorded message. So we will now play the recorded messages for public comment, so please listen carefully.
Hi, my name is Kelly Cruz, and I am a parent in AISD. I'm calling to express my support and continued funding for librarians in this area in Austin, like AR in the surrounding areas. Librarians are essential for so many reasons. They are crucial to reversing low reading assessment scores across the county, and they're a central part of our public education system with a proven impact of learning. While underserved students see bigger gains from robust library services, they are much less likely to have access to these resources. So I am calling to just encourage you to keep funding the Austin public libraries in our schools. Thank you for your support, and I appreciate it.
Hello, my name is Lindsay Stewart, and I am a parent of an Austin ISD student. I am calling today to express my support for continued funding for librarians, just like surrounding districts in the Austin area. Librarians are essential to spark a love of learning and encourage reading. They are crucial to reversing low reading assessment scores across the country, and particularly those in the district. Librarians are an essential part of our public education system with a proven impact on learning. Thank you for recognizing that funding librarians are essential to our children's success.
Hi, my name is Lauren Signer, and I'm a parent of an AISD student, 2 AISD students, and I'm expressing my wholehearted belief, support, and need for AISD libraries. We have been directly impacted. Only good things. My children love the library. It fosters learning. It continues curiosity. It helps them become smarter, more independent people. Our librarian's fantastic, and she goes above and beyond, and it's a safe space for my children, and we need to keep libraries in schools 100%. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Taylor Magenheim. I am a property owner in AISD and parent of 2 children. And I'm just calling to voice my support and the importance of libraries and librarians at school. One of my children had trouble reading, and the librarian that was working at our school really leaned in, not only helped her learn how to read, but really showed her an enjoyment of reading. And I think these are the kinds of things that are difficult to teach in the curriculum or even spot, but a librarian is able to. And as a result, my child is a much better reader, is doing better in school overall, and is enjoying learning. So don't want to lose this resource. I think it's one of the more important ones at a school. So thank you.
Hello, my name is Jill Carley, and I'm an AISD parent. I'm calling today to express my support for continued funding for librarians, just like surrounding districts in the Austin area. And librarians are really essential because they provide a robust reading collection for students who may not have access at home. They spark a love of learning that lasts a lifetime, and it introduces students to new and different topics. My 6-year-old loves her weekly visits to the school library and the librarian in particular, especially the opportunity to pick out books in both English and Spanish. Thank you for recognizing that funding librarians is essential to our children's success.
Good afternoon. This is Shira Goldberg. I am an assistive technology specialist with the Austin ISD, and I am in the related service department on the same pay scale currently as occupational therapists. But in the Prop A proposed pay increases, assistive technology specialists have been placed on the PRF4 pay scale with projected average increase of 6.37%. Currently, assistive technology specialists, like I said, are on the same pay scale as occupational therapists. What the assistive technology team is requesting is to remain on the same pay scale as occupational therapists, whatever the equivalent to RS1 is, which I think in the Prop A pay scale is PRF6, and that would be because we are in the same related service department with the same supervisor performing related services for special education students. We are not occupational therapists, but we are assistive technology specialists, which is, again, a related.
Okay. So this concludes public comment. Trustees, are there any questions or clarifications? Nope. Okay, thank you. So as a reminder, please feel free to share any general comments or questions with the board by email at trustees@austinisd.org. So I'll move on to the president's report. Last week, the Austin Ed Fund and the district held the 10th annual Inspire the Future Luncheon. The event raised, drumroll please, $590,000. Yes. And these will be used for grants for teachers, schools, and departments on innovative practices and educational opportunities for students. I like to call the Ed Fund the innovation engine of AISD. This year's event included 740 guests and 142 sponsors. It was sold out. The event showcased student performers from across the district, including the Keeling Symphony Orchestra, Bowie High School Drumline, the Mac Theater, and the Crockett Early College High School Ballet Folklorico and Mariachi. So thank you to everyone who helped with this wonderful event. We are all looking forward to seeing the teachers and departments who will benefit when the next round of Inspire the Future grants are opened up. Also, with the passage of Austin ISD Proposition A in Tuesday's election, voters in the Austin community chose to invest in our public school teachers, our essential public school employees, our students, and our community's future. So yes, thank you. Thank you. Prop A will have a meaningful impact on our students and staff. $17.8 million is being spent to make market adjustments for most teachers and staff, with the highest increase going to teachers. I know many staff are wondering when they will see this, and the administration has shared that adjustments will be reflected by the second paycheck in December. And the first payment will include retroactive pay to the start date for each employee this year. Just in time for the holidays, yeah. Nice. $3.2 million will go into additional support and resources at campuses, including content interventionists, special education support, and mental health support. In addition, about $20 million would be used to offset current costs and reduce the budget deficit. So thank you so much to our staff, to our fellow trustees and community members who worked so hard to pass Prop A. We are grateful for the community support of Proposition A, which will help the district retain the educators and staff whose talents underpin everything we do in AISD. Our next item is part of our commitment to discuss student achievement, and we have a presentation on scorecard goal 2, numeracy, which is GPM 2.1. So before we hear our presentation, we need to confirm our monitoring report is complete. Does anyone have evidence that the elements of an effective monitoring report are not present? Okay, thank you. So since everyone agrees that the required elements are present, we will turn the floor to Superintendent Segura for the presentation.
Thank you, President Singh, Board of Trustees. As the team approaches, which we'll be given the update regarding scorecard goal 2, growth progress measure 2.1. I have joining me Lakeisha Drinks, Assistant Superintendent of Elementary Schools, Dr. Marianne Maxwell, Assistant Superintendent of Elementary Academics, and Jennifer Jones, Director of Elementary STEM. And so one of the things that we're going to do as we move forward is really kind of provide an overview or executive summary just to kind of set the stage, because there are so many things that are occurring in Austin ISD, and sometimes when we present presentations, we're sharing one very kind of small part of that work. And so we definitely want to talk about that, the fact that in Austin ISD we believe that math instruction, because we are talking about numeracy, should be engaging, relevant, and student-centered. All students mean that they're not just students that are good at math, and they're not just students that are good at reading. This, however, used to be the case. To ensure all students succeed and comprehend numeracy skills, we have to start early and build year over year. It used to be that memorization was foundational. I remember the times tables. So I remember the times tables as a student in Austin ISD. I remember us having these sheets, and we would race through them, and if I could beat my say colleague, if I beat my fellow student, then it was good. It was a good thing. And I got really good at memorization, but it wasn't comprehension. And so in Austin ISD, the way of those types of spreadsheets and worksheets, I should say, are done, the ways of the past. Students must understand that 2 times 3 equals 6 and must be able to arrive at the answer in multiple ways, such as understanding this consists of 2 groups of 3, and a student can show that with an array or demonstrate their approach to thinking, not just memorize that 2 times 3 equals 6. Our approach must be one that results in our students learning the skills they need to be successful, being able to apply those skills at home or in everyday life. And we talk about everyday life. You know, a lot of times we want to ensure that our students are using these things, these skills at home, whether it's, you know, in the kitchen, having conversations with their parents, just really in everyday practice. For example, we must support our teachers differently and partner with parents to meet our student needs. A key example is how we teach addition and subtraction. In first grade, students work on simple single-digit problems. An example might be 7 plus 3 or 10 minus 4. And to build fluency with basic math facts. However, in second grade, and again, this is where the kind of building on occurs, students must solve more complex problems that require regrouping, such as 47 plus 68 or 84 minus 39. This is why alignment between grade levels is absolutely critical. We do this by building on skills year over year and use project-based learning to ensure comprehension. Our balanced model of instruction includes conceptual understanding, mathematical reasoning and strategies, and numerical fluency. And so in this goal progress measure 2.1, numeracy intervention data shows, which is what we are tracking in this scorecard, show that there is much work to do in Austin ISD, but we are seeing decreasing trends for most student groups, which is good. Remember, in this scorecard, decreasing is good. That's the one thing that is different than the last scorecard that we had. This includes student groups, including Black or African American students, and in spring of 23-24, 64%, and in this data reporting, 54%. So a 15% decrease, which again is a good thing. Students identified as economically disadvantaged from spring of 23-24 at 57 down to 50. So 7% decrease, 7 percentage points decrease. And then students receiving special education services from 55 to 53. And so currently there is not an on-track methodology recommended by the administration or approved by the board. That's one of the things that we're going to work through as we redefine our board monitoring reports. And I would say at this time that we are seeing decreasing trends, which is encouraging, but I would not say just quite yet that we're on track. Over the past several years, there's been a focus on literacy within K-12, which is one of the reasons why math outcomes have not rebounded back to pre-pandemic levels. Additionally, we know that literacy is a necessary skill to successfully be used in numeracy. As a system, we must generate the same level of interest and focus on numeracy as we have been on literacy. The characteristics of our outlier schools and data for growth in this growth progress measure include tenured or experienced teachers. Although the outlier campuses have experienced some of the same staffing challenges, they have been able to retain a core group of teacher leaders and support staff members. So essentially what's saying is that we're seeing vacancies across the system, but in these areas, in these schools, the ones that are outliers, they've been able to maintain that core group of teachers. Families and students are engaged in local settings and progress monitoring. Most of the outliers had at least a basic system for progress monitoring and providing tiered interventions. The leaders of the outlier campuses routinely collaborate with various departments, including multilingual education, special education, the academics team, again, to address challenges that we have within the learning environments. Most outlier campuses serving large number of underserved student populations have principals that have been in their position for at least 5 years on that campus. Now, that's not, true across the board. We have other schools that are not outliers that do have principals that have been in place for 5 years, but that was something consistent across these was that 5 or more years was generally for the case for principals on these campuses. And almost all have a clear academic vision and plan for what is happening in classrooms and in PLCs while maintaining a positive culture and climate, as indicated in past Panorama surveys. The outlier campuses serving large numbers of underserved student populations have robust systems of wraparound supports, including communication goals and progress to families, strong partnerships with our team of licensed mental health professionals, and intentional systems for supporting families with basic needs, such as campus food pantries and closets and clothes, which is what we see for a lot of our campuses that have these needs. Just additional supports, partnering with different entities within our community. When we talk about outliers, there are a couple that I'd like to share with you that demonstrate kind of these characteristics, including Galindo, Guerrero Thompson, Oak Hill, and Rodriguez. And so we are refining our initiatives to instill a love for math in our youngest mathematicians, and we are focused on creating engaging math environments, encouraging student discourse and exploration of mathematical concepts, and expanding ways that students can show their thinking with math solutions. So again, because of where we are in the process, as we're developing initiatives, as we're kind of updating the monitoring reports, we wanted to provide an overview to our community and to our board before we got into the kind of the details of the report, just because there are so many great things occurring in Austin ISD, and sometimes we don't talk about those as much. So I'm going to hand it over to the team, and they'll continue through the presentation. Dr. Maxwell? I didn't even pull it up. Should have pulled it up. There it is.
I think these first slides actually were covered mostly by Mr. Segura, but good evening, Board of Trustees and Mr. Segura. We're happy to be here tonight to talk about numeracy in Austin and some of the early results that we have this year compared to kind of where we were the previous years. And so this goal tonight is focused on, the board goal is on third grade numeracy, and then we're reporting on the GPM 2.1, where ultimately we're looking for a decrease of from 37% in June of 2024 to 29% in 5 years from now by June of 2029. And then again, we're looking at the achievement percentiles of our second graders. So first, we just wanted to start again with these overarching objectives that we have in math. They're similar, and you'll see quite a few similarities with this presentation as the previous one in literacy last month. And so overall, really looking at building foundational knowledge, increasing understanding and competency of our school leaders, and then investing time and support with our teachers with actual classroom implementation. A little bit of a difference with the literacy. The literacy actually talks more about building upon a foundation in literacy that already exists and recognizing that math is in a little bit of a different place. We haven't had nearly as much professional learning as in math as we have in literacy the last few years. We really want to focus more on where are we with our foundational knowledge, learning about that, recognizing that, what we're offering in the way of professional learning and our resources, for our teachers and our campus leaders to really build that foundation up even more, to really think through where is it that we need to spend most of our time in math and how can we make that the best as possible over the next few years. Recognizing, too, that we are very, very heavily focused on our literacy initiative right now. So the time that we spend in math has a little bit of a difference for literacy because we can't do all things at the same time. And so we're being strategic about that this year and then paying lots of attention to some of our successes and some of our challenges in implementing the literacy initiative this year so that we can move forward even in a better place with math next year. And the research that we have cited tonight is really national level research, talking about the NAEP exam of 64% of fourth graders across the United States scored below proficient on the math assessment, and 25% scored at the below basic level. And we wanted to bring this forth tonight because it really, we like to talk a lot more, we'd like to continue talking a lot more about what the urgency level is in math. And it's here and it's everywhere. I think we're all feeling the struggle with where we are in our math performance and just recognizing that this is happening on a national level. For Austin ISD, our data for this assessment and is actually very similar. It's 61% for below proficient and 24% below the basic level. So we're pretty close to where we are as a national trend. I will say, and this was brought up in some of the questions, that of the urban districts, we're seeing a lot of similar performance. Of the urban districts around us, I think it was 22 that participate in the trial urban district assessments, and we are fourth in that compared to other urban districts. So I think while we're compared, which is kind of an interesting comparison. So while we're performing better than many of our urban districts across the United States, still in general, math needs some attention. It does have some urgency, and we really want to figure out the best things that we can do for it. And then next here we have some data specific to second grade for the initial fall MAP assessment that they took this year in math. And so overall, as you look across, we have some key takeaways there on the side, so I'll just talk about those. This is, again, achievement percentiles, and so what we're looking at right here at the top is where we're moving the all students. But again, just like literacy, what we would like to do is really pay attention to how much we're moving our most underserved populations and have that be the primary piece that moves the overall student score, the overall student percentiles for achievement. So that's our area of focus, even though we are looking at all students for the ultimate GPM. And so we can see some trends here. So what we're seeing here, like all students, and for spring, so comparing the spring year over year from 22 and then 23 and then 2024, we had 38% of our students were scoring below the 30th percentile in math. And so what that indicates to us is that these students per this assessment, and of course, again, we use multiple points of data to make the final decision, but these students could qualify for interventions. So they're a little bit below where they should be for their grade level that they're being compared to. And then that goes down in 2023, goes back up in 2024, has come back down now in the fall of 2025. So we get into a little more of the reasons why we think we see this variability later in the presentation, but that actually it's for all students, but you can see a very similar trend for all of our student populations as well. And then that last column there shows what the target is for the end of this year in spring. So again, we're kind of trying to compare spring to spring to spring and ultimately to spring at the end of this year. We're just looking now as our first look within year to see kind of where we are in relation to that end of year target. So overall, we do see some decreasing trends, and we actually have some significant decreasing trends. Again, that's a good thing. And some of our most underserved student populations, I believe our largest decrease was in the African American population from spring and already to fall of this year, and also decreasing quite a bit over time. But large gaps between underserved and all students. These gaps in math are actually a little bit higher in most of our student populations than they are in literacy. And so when you compare all students to our most underserved in math, those gaps between how those students are performing to all students is larger than what we have in literacy. And then our root cause analysis, as we begin to look at this data, we talked a little bit about this last time as well, and we talked about extensively for the questions that are posted along with tonight's presentation about our observations that happen in the classroom, our instructional reviews, actually have some additional data even coming in from some of our diagnostics of our campuses that all pointed to very similar things and findings for us as we began to dig a little bit deeper. We saw a lot of the same thing of inconsistent use of instructional materials and research-based instructional high-quality things, and then inconsistent implementation of math practices along with that. And then, again, just for literacy, we have the same thing happening for math. We had some resources indicated at Tier 1, and then a large amount of resources that were possible to use, but not necessarily provided to every single campus for Tier 2 and Tier 3. So we had a huge mix of resources that, and really curriculum that aligned with the resources to address our students that are most at need, that really need Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. So that was happening in our system with math quite a bit. And then again, what we consider the highest quality professional learning is really that embedded coaching, the one-on-one observations, feedback, next steps for improvement. As we know, as we've invested in instructional coaches, we've found that that's the highest quality level of professional learning, and across the district, we just had very different expectations and structures for observation, feedback, and coaching for the next best step for improvement. So again, saw that in math. A lot of course, what you would see, what you can imagine at the elementary level in a system that teaches all things for, especially at the early levels, what you will find to be true in one content area, you will also find to be true in another content area. So we saw a lot of similarities with those root causes in our analysis.
So just to piggyback on that, on strategies, you'll see a lot of overlap also on the strategies that were presented in the literacy presentation as well as here in the mathematics, but I'd like to just kind of touch on them from the mathematical lens, just so you know what all's included in those. So the very first one, as far as the HQIM and the actual district-provided curriculum, it is aligned to math research, and the way that it does that, first of all, knowing that the use of these types of materials, first of all, it's good for all students, but we really know that it's critical for our underserved students, students that are already performing behind grade level. They have to have access to this very high-quality instructional material in order to get the best results and start filling some of those gaps that they may have. And so we make sure to provide that, but also our specific HQIM that the district provides or that others are using that meet the requirements of that also include really rigorous grade level standard material, obviously, but it embeds these strategies for how to actually teach it. And one of those, it could be like concrete learning and hands-on models, and then we move into some representational or pictorial things. It also is going to draw in a lot of mathematical reasoning, which is really important for students because we're not just trying to teach them the math itself, but also how to think mathematically. And that sometimes has been a crucial piece that's a struggle sometimes to get even young learners to be able to do. So the HQIM provides that. So being able to see that in the classroom and have teachers planning with that and utilizing it and then using it instructionally is really going to support all of our learners to help us reach these goals and their lofty goals that we've set. Another piece of that, and we kind of touched on it, the MTSS system, those targeted interventions, I think Dr. Maxwell said, like, we didn't really have a really consistent use. There was a lot of different materials being used or sometimes a lack of materials being used. So the ones that are provided to our teachers this year, or if they're adopting other materials that meet the requirements of a high quality intervention program, it's going to be very systematic because even though, you know, math, you can do a lot of exploratory pieces and you can start off with something that's less, direct with students. In an intervention setting, students are struggling. So we need to make sure we're modeling that. We help them understand how to think mathematically. So that's explicitly written into the interventions. And then the interventions that we provide also use the CRA kind of learning strategy progression, which moves them from a concrete understanding, so a lot of hands-on, very physical, concrete understanding. We connect that to representations of what that looks like, so more picture-based or being able to create representations, and then eventually move into the abstract, which is the way most of us were taught, which is very algorithm-based and very, mathematical, being able to follow a set of procedures. And students move in and out of those. It's not necessarily linear. It's that we're able to expose them to a variety of each of those pieces of the model, and they're seeing that consistently throughout the intervention program. So even students who are struggling are being exposed to that high-quality intervention and that high-quality material to really start closing some gaps that they're experiencing. And we know that's going to pay off later because those foundational skills are critical in order to start layering on higher levels of mathematics as students move in to upper levels in elementary and beyond into our middle school and high school programs. Another piece, of course, you see here is just the professional learning. And professional learning is something that, of course, is ongoing, but we know there's a real need for that in mathematics instruction. And so we're starting small because, as you know, literacy is a huge focus right now for our district. But there are things that we are already putting in place, and we'll continue to build on those. And so this year, we are getting breakout time and specific time with our campus leaders to be able to just solidify some of our understanding of what good mathematics instruction looks like and really break it down and relate it back to our MTSS walkthrough form that's kind of a part of that last strategy to make sure they understand what am I looking for when I go into the classroom and how do I know that I'm seeing it. And that'll connect, like I said, to that next strategy. And then another piece of that is we have time with our instructional coaches that are at some of our campuses across the district. And so our academic coaching specialist team is able to come together, as well as MED and MTSS and some other areas, to be able to support our coaches with helping them feel confident in their supportive teachers. And then we also have our beginning next week, actually, PLC lead meetings where we're able to meet with PLC leaders, whether that be teacher leaders, it could be instructional coaches, it could be campus leadership, and they're able to come and not only learn best practice of PLC practices and get that information to go back and then implement in their PLCs, but also getting upcoming content so that we feel really prepared to talk through that in our PLC setting and then deliver it in the classroom. So that's going to be something that's new, and we're really excited to start next week. And then the very last one, that connection to the MTSS walkthrough and the observation and feedback, all of that learning that we just talked about is so that they can go back and actually give really tailored support and feedback to teachers that's going to make a difference for our students and know how to deliver that. And then what does that coaching support look like for teachers to continue to grow in those practices in the classroom. And then I absolutely am excited about this slide because who doesn't love to see what's happening in our classrooms? So we just so you can kind of see, there is a lot happening. We have students that are engaging in concrete learning, as you can see there in those first couple of photographs. We have students that are actually using base 10 blocks, and they're designing their own models and using those models to, this is actually a set of fourth graders working on long division. And I know none of us, I don't know about you all, were taught long division with base 10 blocks. It was very much learning the algorithm, understanding how to bring your numbers down, line everything up perfectly. So the fact that we're seeing this, and you'll notice there's not pencil and paper in front of them. And for some of us, we're like, oh my gosh, there should be pencil and paper. But it's all about discourse, and students are talking about what they're doing before they have to go then and apply it in a paper-based format. So this is so strong. It's building academic language with our students. It's really honing in on them being able to use that concrete model to use as an anchor of support for that discussion and for them to see it visually before we jump right in and expect them to be able to carry out that algorithm. And then on the next side, you'll see here some students creating multiple representations and showing how they would, they're actually trading out tens for hundreds here and showing how place value works. So they're drawing out their number in their place value, and this is actually one of our targeted intervention group, and then they're moving those over. So you can see that students are really interacting with the math. They're not just solving problems and computing. And so for that, I think a question came up about instilling a love of math and really getting kids excited about it. And I know firsthand we've seen some really excited students in intervention groups, which that's a lot. That's a big ask, and to have them so excited and teachers really excited teaching also. So a lot of great things happening across our classrooms.
And so, as we've mentioned before, you'll notice that many of the leadership strategies are consistent with those that we shared during the literacy presentation. And again, that's because our intention this year is to really build on the solid practices that we are implementing in literacy With instruction and with learning, many best practices transfer across content areas, and we're really trying to take advantage of that idea. Again, without overwhelming our campus teams with adding as much work around numeracy as we are around literacy. And so as we continue to present, you won't see many changes with design. Because right now at this point, we're really focused on monitoring, receiving feedback from our campuses, and then refining. And so it's more of a cycle of monitor, collect feedback, refine. Because I think in this district, we've had a practice of if it's a little bit bumpy, we abandon, right? Like it isn't working, we're done, what's next? And so we really are trying to avoid that practice because it clearly hasn't worked for us. And so we want to take the things that we do know are best practices and they're working on some of our campuses and figure out the ways to implement them across the district, but again, refining the practices as we receive feedback from teachers and from leaders. And so with that being said, we have increased our professional learning opportunities, and this is based on campus request, because again, we were very intentional about going slow to go fast. But we have some eager beavers that want to know more. And so with that being said, we are providing a training for all of our interested teachers in January on one of the professional learning days, and this is around stations and centers. We notice when we visit classrooms that our teachers are working super hard on stations and centers, and if you know about those, you know that you change them out pretty frequently. And so it's really not something that we want our teachers to invest hours and hours in one station that they're going to have to change out in a couple of weeks. And so our academics team has built in some lessons and activities into the lesson plans so that they're right there for them and they're differentiated for the students that need a little additional support and for those that have already mastered the skill, what can they do as an extension? And so we want to provide them with a learning opportunity to help them to navigate those tools. Because again, the support that we're really focused on providing is to really make implementation of the curriculum and of the resources as easy on our teachers as possible, knowing that they have all the many things as we're focusing on literacy, as we have the new responsibilities around MTSS. Again, we readily accept their feedback and then make adjustments. And so with that being said, one of the things areas that we continue to monitor and refine is our implementation of PLCs. Right now, our PLCs are critical in our movement as we tackle the goals of the order. And so our teachers were doing a pretty good job about collecting data. But the conversations now around using multiple data points to determine if an intervention is necessary and then which intervention to begin is a little new. And so we are having multiple conversations about, like, does the student need an intervention plan, or is the plan to improve the attendance? So am I struggling in math because I am missing 2 days a week of school? And so sometimes having that conversation as a teacher group is very important versus a teacher trying to figure that out in isolation. And so again, we didn't start the idea with PLCs around having that conversation, but it has evolved and become very meaningful conversations. And it also allows our teachers to do some things like data entry that we don't want them spending time outside of the school day having to do. And we do know that the data does need to be entered in ECST. And so again, you'll notice that the strategies repeat because consistency is important. And so we are encouraging our leaders and we are coaching them on being consistent, especially with walkthrough and feedback. Anytime you implement anything new or you're doing anything new, it's very important that you have the consistent feedback. Bite-sized steps of what you can do next to continue to get better. And so that has been a focus for the elementary team, is to really provide feedback to our leaders as a model of a way for them to provide feedback to their teachers on a very regular basis. And so those are the leadership strategies that we are working on at this point in our plan. And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you so much. I was so engaged in your presentation, I did not have my script ready. So, thank you so much. I wanted to see if trustees had any questions, and I just, as a gentle reminder, to please, think about the questions in terms of our LSG guidance that we have, and everybody has in their little, all the trustees have a little folder that has a nice layout of the different progress monitoring questions that are sort of approved and encouraged by Lone Star Governance. So thank you. And who has questions? Trustee Gonzalez?
Hi, yes, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Drakes and Dr. Maxwell, for talking about some of the differences between what we're looking at for numeracy and literacy in terms of, and the similarities, in terms of the strategy, in terms of the similarities in performance, the difference in achievement between underserved and non. Could you talk a little bit more when it comes to root causes? What are some of the elements that you find that are unique to the performance that we're seeing in numeracy that are different from what we talked about last time in literacy?
I think there are a couple of different things that are demonstrative of like how math has been implemented a little bit differently than literacy. Mentioned the variability in the data earlier too, because part of that is our historical data review, where we are, where we've been, what it's looked like over the years to try to figure out what has worked and maybe what hasn't worked. And so as you look at the columns for the data in the data table, that first column is 21-22. That year we implemented Go Math as our district-wide curriculum at elementary. The next year in 22-23, we stopped using Go Math and we implemented Eureka. And you can imagine every time you implement a new curriculum, it would take an extensive amount of professional learning and time to get good at it. So we changed it to Eureka that year, and then that was not, from my understanding, that wasn't well received in the district or wasn't helpful. It didn't meet the needs at the time, and so changed again in the year 23-24 to STEM Scopes Math. So that was the third change in curriculum in as many years. And so when we talk about HQIM for literacy versus math, there's significantly more change in the system over the years, which even more so, I think, it's evident when you're observing instruction. Because at that point, and quite rightfully so, teachers had said, I'm just going to use what I think has worked the best for me over the years. And not to say good things weren't still happening with that, but the inconsistency and the lack of ability to really use one resource, have common conversations, build vertically year after year. You get better the second year than you did the first year, et cetera, is underlying in that data. So we see that kind of difference in instructional materials with numeracy than with literacy. This year is really the second year now for STEM Scopes Math. And I believe it was rolled out a little bit late last year and not with all of the resources at the same time. So access to the resource, but not necessarily the physical resources that came with it, on top of a curriculum that didn't match it at that time. So this year, same resource for the second year in a row. And so we'd like to look at that and see what that's doing in the system, as well as a set of curriculum documents that guides the usage of the resource. So that's the tool that helps teachers make sense of what is usually at a curriculum level, very comprehensive, layers of things in it, intensity, resources in it, and it can be a lot to take in and can be overwhelming. And so that's why our curriculum guides actually help teachers use that resource this year. So that, kind of is all part of what we've seen in the system, and then I'm talking a little bit to the strategy as well. And then just in instructional practices, more variability. I think there was, seemed in our rounds and as much observation as we had over the last year, seemed a little more consistency with understanding of literacy practices and not the same level of consistency. And really, I'm speaking across grade levels now. I know we're looking at second grade, and we look at that as a data point, but we really look at the whole system when we're making these decisions. Because we're not doing this just for second grade, right? We're looking at that data point, but we're making it for the moves for the entire system. Just like lack of consistency across classrooms, and then vertically, we saw that even a little bit more. So those are really the differences, I would say, underlying the root cause that may look the same on the front, but it just played itself out a little bit differently in literacy and numeracy. Do you have anything to add?
Thank you. That then the strategies that are on slide 6 as it relates to professional learning to implement that new set of strategies, materials in the STEM curriculum, and fidelity to the coaching cycle make a lot of sense to me. So if the investment that President Singh was talking about earlier through Prop A, adding additional instructional coaches, I imagine to help facilitate what we just talked about. Are there any additional changes that you might expect to the budget to further support that strategy?
And to, I guess, a clarification, I think you said instructional coaches, or did you say content interventionists?
I said the first one.
Yeah. Okay. It's so that for Prop A, the majority of the investment is for content interventionists,
Okay.
which is really where we need tier 2 support and instruction and intervention. So that's just a clarification I wanted to make in case anybody was kind of following along.
Thank you. Yeah, I missed that.
I think I've mentioned this before to our departments and the administration. Thank you for sticking with the investment in the same curriculum that we're using now that we used last year. There were some free resources available from the state at the time, and instead of choosing those, we did stick with the resources that we had. And I really continue to believe that helps teachers in the classroom find consistency, because the other thing is there is no curriculum that is written that is perfect, and it will never reach all students, and that's just not how curriculum is written. There are some other aspects of curriculum now that are better than what they used to be as far as embedded supports for different learning and universal design and things like that. But it will never reach all students, and so ultimately what we want all of us to be and our teachers to be is critical consumers of curriculum, so that you know it well, you can teach it well, and then you make appropriate choices for your students when it's time. And that's difficult to do when you change the curriculum year over year. Underlying principles are usually the same, but unless you've invested years of study in curriculum and time with that, and we know teachers don't have time for all of that. They have students showing up every day. They have similarities, but the day-to-day changes enough to where it becomes difficult to implement with a critical eye. I'd say that's one investment that we do already make, and that I hope that we can continue making at the district level. STEM Scopes is on the list for the state. Quite a few materials that are on the list to be approved for reimbursement by the state. So STEM Scopes is on the list, and it is so far at 100% score. So it's quite a good material, and we believe we should be able to stick with it. So, and then the other investment, of course, that you mentioned is the content interventionists. So what we're talking about quite a bit tonight is Tier 1, and we've said that over and over. That's the primary goal of our focus for MTSS, is to really improve Tier 1. But it is true, as we can see from our data, there are large numbers of students that are performing below level. So what we have to do is really provide quality interventions for those students. And once you get to the Tier 3 level, it is very difficult for a classroom teacher to implement that consistently because of the time it takes at Tier 3. It's usually a longer in intensity, more frequent in duration, and so content interventionists come to play a lot there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Kaufman?
My questions have been asked and answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Hunter?
My My questions also have been asked and answered and can be found on page 15 in the backup. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, no. The same response. There was some really good sort of backup materials in terms of what was asked and the answers provided, and so I'm good for right now.
Thank you. Just so people know, trustees have the opportunity to submit questions ahead of time through our tracker, and you can find those questions and the answers online in board docs as well. So I have a few questions. Thank you so much. First, I wanted to go back to the slide with the data, please. Go to slide 5. That one, yep, thank you. I really appreciate the disaggregation here. And so I wanted to ask, based on this data, so looking at the fall column and comparing that to our target, the last column are our targets for the spring, correct? Okay, and lower numbers are better. Okay, so based on this, I think I have an idea of who's struggling the most in meeting targets, but can you share with us who is struggling the most in meeting the targets that we have set in these student groups?
Yes, so what we have here are most of our student populations have either met or exceeded the targets. Those student populations that have not yet are Hispanic, Latinx population, and the emergent bilingual population.
Okay, thank you. And so what do you see? I guess the question is to Superintendent. What do you see as accounting for the Hispanic and the emergent bilingual student populations not meeting the targets that have been set?
Yeah, well, I'll go and then I'll hand it over to Dr. Maxwell. Well, I think one of the things is, and I think it's indicative of how the fact that the overall percent hasn't decreased significantly, and it's a large student group, which means there's lots of students in lots of schools. And so, we talked about consistency and we talked about implementing with fidelity over time, and we're just not quite at a point yet where we're starting to see that move in the way that we would expect. I think that by the time we get to the end of the year, we will be there. But it's really a function of, as you talked about, is the scale. It's a large student population. Mm-hmm. We're focusing in, but because of the number of schools, the number of students, there's variability with how we, just really the support that's been provided. So I don't know, Dr. Maxwell, anything you want to add?
I'll take it. And students, some of the students are counted in both groups, right? And so you'll see both of those groups move in a very similar manner. One thing that we are supporting our teachers with is really using cross-linguistic connections in math, and then also manipulatives for our emergent bilingual students that are working in English. And so that it's super important that they're able to see a visual of what's being explained to them. And so we are seeing our teachers really starting to embrace those strategies. And I think once we implement them with more fidelity, we'll start to see more of a movement in those student groups.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then how do we address the maybe uneven implementation of instructional practices?
I think in this particular instance, and so just a reminder of the dual language model, the math is taught in Spanish in kindergarten. And then last year, we made some changes this year, but last year, which would of course be the second graders, in first grade, the model flips from Spanish to English, and so math is taught all in English. And then second grade is the second year that they have math all in English. And so what we saw in observations in the classroom, however, were a lot of classrooms that were teaching math in Spanish. And so depending on the language of testing that they would have been tested in English, but depending on that language, whether it's their native language or whether or not it's their second language, you'll see some of that effect in these scores. And so part of what we have seen this year, because we have become much more clear and have talked a lot more about what our language of instruction model looks like, and have started embedding second language supports into the math curriculum to really support those learners. We have seen quite a bit of difference in math instruction actually happening in English in second grade. So I think our thought, really I say just mine, but we've all talked about this, our thought is that it might take a little bit of time for that to show up in second grade scores, because it does take time to have consistency of language of instruction, especially when it's in your second language, for that to show on an academic exam that may have some language that you're not as familiar with as you would be if you had been using very solid vocabulary instruction and sheltered instruction and those kinds of strategies. So that's a little bit specific to that population. As far as monitoring of instructional practices, we do a lot of course, rounds ourselves and our teams, our larger teams, and have very, very consistent conversations about that. But also are having a lot of conversations with principals, assistant principals, instructional coaches, while we're working with them much more closely and heavily this year as far as professional learning and all of our resources. We also provide time to ask what they're seeing in the classrooms as well. And so a lot of that happens just through follow-up, mutual conversations, calibrations of observations that we're doing to really see what's happening instructionally in the classrooms.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, Trustee Boswell.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. Really appreciate all the information and answering so many of the questions I know we had during the presentation. A lot of the questions we shared, the written questions, so thank you for that. I have a question about just the big variability in this data. Just given the degree of variability year over year, how confident are you that this is solid data? And you know, kind of what steps have been taken to make sure you feel confident in the data?
So while there is some variability, we have to consider that we're looking at different cohorts, and there are different factors to consider for each cohort. We have taken great efforts to make sure that the MAP growth assessment is administered with more fidelity across the district. Early on, that contributed to some of the variability. So if you have a first grade teacher that has, very structured administration of how they administer the assessment, and then students move to second grade and it's a little looser, sometimes you see that they don't meet growth that you would have expected. And so we worked probably last year on really making sure that campuses had an assessment plan as to how they were going to administer this, because if we spend time, have our students spend time taking MAP growth, we want to make sure that it's data that we can use. We are comfortable, and we feel like this is a fair data point, because again, I think we continue to go back to it's not our only data point when we make instructional decisions about students.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And I'm really interested on slide 5 in that spring 22-23 performance, understanding that there are different cohorts, but that spring 22-23 seemed to be a bright spot with significantly fewer students scoring at the levels to qualify for intervention among many groups. And I'd love to know a little bit more about your understanding of why we're seeing that in that group specifically.
I mentioned a little bit about the changes in resources that we had from year to year, and I don't think everything can be attributed to resources, but when you look back and see changes like this, you kind of try to think, what was the biggest thing that might have happened that year? And my colleagues may have some more thoughts about what did happen that year, as I wasn't in classrooms here that year. I was in a different set of classrooms. But looking back, the biggest change really was that curriculum change. And while it wasn't, I think the right curriculum or the right fit at the right time for Austin ISD, there's a significant difference between the Go Math curriculum and the Eureka Math curriculum in its level of explicit and systematic instruction. It is robust, I would say. Like, it has a lot to it. It's very, very comprehensive, and probably has more than you can do in a day, as a lot of curriculums do. But it is very explicit and systematic, and so you will see that come through pretty quickly on things like screeners that test for a lot of skills that you would expect at the early grade levels in like kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. And that could be a reason why the scores looked a little bit different that year. Again, the switch to STEM scopes the next year. STEM scopes curriculum is built a little bit differently. I feel like I'm getting a little in your lane now, and you could also explain this very well. It's built a little bit differently, though, in that it has sort of larger scopes that need to be kind of looked through and then put together for a more kind of comprehensive daily way to look at things, or for more of a consistent way to look at things through the day or through a week. And so if you just look at the resource itself, it doesn't quite do the same thing as Eureka Math, which is where our curriculum guides in math came in very, very, it came in to be very, very important. And you might want to add some to that.
I know, she knows I could go on and on. But with what Dr. Maxwell is saying, so moving from that, we kind of had this weird year last year of this resource that's really highly engaging and promoting, and it follows a 5E model. So I don't know if you're familiar with that, but the 5E model basically for STEM curriculum is really highly sought after because that's the way that the brain works, right? So it takes you through like engaging and getting students ready for the learning. So there's like a hook to it. There's something to draw students in that's a little more open-ended. It's not so like, I'm gonna start off modeling right away. And then we tie that into what they're actually going to like explore and do within learning. And then that deepens to another level of where we're actually like getting students interacting with it, being able to explain it themselves, kind of manipulate, make connections. And then from there, we start evaluating their ability to do that. And so for math and science, in science, it's been done for a long time, and then now it's moved over a lot to the math world. So STEM Scopes does that, but without a lot of professional learning for teachers to understand how to put that together, it can be really hard to understand how to move in and out and what pieces to pull out of those E's, so to speak. So that was what Dr. Maxwell alluded to, that we made a giant adjustment for this year, and actually my team is still writing as the year goes, to provide guides that actually make that a little bit more solid for teachers. So it doesn't feel so picking kind of and choosing. It's more how we go across those 5Es and what activities build on each other to complete that model. But then you still have a lot of autonomy within like how you're implementing that into practice in the classroom. So it's guided and it kind of it leads you to those activities, but it's not scripted per se. It doesn't like tell you say this, ask this, do this. It gives you ideas of what to do and how to do that, which materials you would need, what manipulatives or tools kids might use, and so on. So I know my team and I are excited to see, because we've seen so much of it in the classrooms, like as we go, is it benefiting our students and our teachers? Like is our teacher practice changing and they're feeling more confident with good mathematical practices by implementing it? And then are we seeing a difference for our students?
Thank you. I appreciate that. Ms. Drinks, do you have anything to add? Okay, thank you. And then what's your understanding of that fall data that does show improvement in so many of our groups and some big improvement among some of our groups? I look at 10 points for African American students improvement. I look at 7 for our students from families with economic disadvantage. And what's your understanding of that improvement in the resources and whether that may be what we're seeing?
I think it's partially the resources, but I also think what gets your attention improves. And so we've been very intentional when we look at data with our campus leaders to look at those student groups. When we visit campuses, we ask directly, about those student groups. Even if it's a campus that only has a small representation, I still ask. And how does their performance look relative to the other students on your campus? We have also been intentional for the last couple of years about focusing support and having our district level staff go out and support our campuses that have large numbers of our traditionally underserved students. And then I know as I think back to my time as an executive director, I had a number of the campuses that serve large numbers of marginalized students, and we had a huge push to make sure those campuses had math manipulatives. And so we submitted some pretty hefty orders to make sure those teachers had what they needed to teach in the most effective ways possible. And so I think it's just a culmination of all of those things coming together. I do want to say this year, thanks to our talent strategy team, we are seeing campuses mostly staffed, like almost fully staffed, versus some of our campuses that you'll see when we talk about tips later in the spring. We saw some campuses drop in achievement, and when I look at those campuses, I directly can correlate that to the number of vacancies that they had, and quite often multiple vacancies at the same grade level. And so now when I talk to campus leaders, they feel a lot more comfortable. Of course, the next step for us is to provide professional learning to those teachers, but at the end of the day, we're excited about having teachers that we're able to train.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you. Trustee Zapata?
I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Were your questions already asked? Yes. Okay, perfect. Trustee Lugo?
Yeah, I have a handful of questions. Thank you all for the presentation. So I'll address these to the superintendent, but obviously, okay. Okay, so we know, there's the large gap between underserved students and all students, right? We see that in the data pretty regularly, but I'd love to kind of be more targeted and say, are these gaps especially large for this GPM? But I'm going to broaden the question and ask, how do these gaps between underserved and all students, how do those gaps compare to what the administration is seeing in all other areas?
So, I guess my first response would be, well, the gaps that we have existed for a while across many different areas. I think, for the work that we're trying to do, as as Ms. Drinks just mentioned, it requires a lot of things really coming together. It's the staff in our campuses. It's our staff believing that our students can achieve. It's having high expectations. It's making sure that we're holding everybody accountable. It's having the resources, it's providing professional development for the resources. It's being healthy enough of an organization to actually do something, pretty aggressive. And I think what Ms. Drinks just mentioned, when we go to campuses, we ask, how are your Black and brown students being served on your campus? What does it look like with the students that you have that are receiving special education services? Talk to me about how they're being supported. And so I guess what I would say is the relative performance still exists, but we are seeing trends in a positive direction. And so the hope is that over time, if we do this well and we resource it appropriately, and you've seen those adjustments in resources 18 months ago with instructional coaches and most recently with content interventionists, then that should continue to fall. It has to. And so I guess what I would say is they exist, they continue to exist, but they are closing. I don't know if anybody else would like to add to that, but that generally speaking is what we're seeing across.
And then I'll just add really quickly. So first, thank you, Superintendent. I'll just kind of add quickly, like in my mind, I'm thinking, like gaps that we're seeing with this goal progress measure, kind of like how do they compare across other areas? So I think what I'm hearing from you is really kind of focused on, right, we're aware that gaps exist between all students and underserved students. But I'm wondering, what about not just in math, but in other areas, right? So if the administration wants to.
Yeah, I think, you'll see the gaps, I think pretty much anywhere we look at data. If you look at attendance data, you'll see the same gaps. Because when a population or group is underserved for such a significant period of time, you're going to create gaps in every area of achievement.
Is one worse or better? You know what I'm trying to get at?
Math
I have to ask it broadly.
Yeah, math is pretty significant
okay,
relative to literacy, but the gaps are still much larger than they should be across the board.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to kind of shift a little bit to root causes. And one thing I noticed, and this may be by design, but that's why I'm asking, right? Like I noticed the root cause analysis this go around for this presentation is similar to our October 10th presentation. I'd be interested in any comments that the administration may have regarding that, and then I have some follow-ups.
I think to kind of go back to what Dr. Maxwell said, because of the grade levels that we're looking at, and because of the systems that need to be implemented over time across the entire district, some of these are going to be root causes across numeracy and literacy, and that's just going to be the case, like MTSS, the support, professional development. And so I think Dr. Maxwell did a pretty good job of explaining or exploring that. And I also want to, reinforce and talk about, root causes and the things that we're trying to move. They're not going to shift all that much from month to month. The root cause is it's embedded in our bones. Like, we're trying to really address it over time. And I think that, for many of them, they do translate across different focus areas, but some of them are different. I don't know, Ms. Drinks, if you'd like to add anything to that, but.
No, I think that's on target. As I mentioned before, with some of our campuses that had declines in achievement last year, they had a number of vacancies. And so if you don't have a teacher, it's a root cause across, for any data point. If a kid has a different substitute every day, you don't have that relationship, right, that drives a student to want to come to school. It's going to impact reading. It's going to impact SEL. And so we are finding that, many of the root causes do pretty much apply across the board. There are a few nuances, like Dr. Maxwell explained, regarding our change in math curriculum and resources consistently over 3 years. So that's a little bit different from literacy. But for the most part, our root causes are pretty consistent.
So I guess kind of along those lines, it's almost like, have you heard of the you have to ask 5 whys?
5 whys.
The why.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so just channel me here, right? The 5 whys. So I'm seeing that commonality, right? We're hearing kind of like, well, right, here's why we're seeing the same root causes. So what's the understanding of like the deeper root cause of those issues, right? And I'll add, kind of what's the understanding of how prevalent those, deeper root causes are, and whether they're more common in certain areas, certain schools, right? Like, what, draw us a picture. Just think of the 5 whys.
Right. I know that's the 5 whys are a great way to explain that, because you do have to look at some of the surface things that you're seeing in your system and then go deeper. Okay, why are we seeing this? Okay, well, there's this or that. There's quite a bit of variation when you start that process, and then the further you look, and why these strategies you'll see are consistent at this point are because once you take a look deeply enough in a system that has real gaps, real movement to make, these are the kinds of root causes that that have the most impact and address the system in the largest way. So these are the things that we saw most consistently, and that we knew when we're looking at our own materials and we're having discussions amongst ourselves and amongst campuses, that there was great repetition in all of these things across there. So either having it or the lack of having it was pretty evident to us as we began to dig. So that's why they won't probably change for a while until we can get a little bit more stable with the larger pieces of what we have uncovered and really started to do some multiple year work on. I think at that point you can look back again and say, okay, now we're at a different place. We've closed the gaps in a way that we want to. Now what are the differences? There might be more differences very specific to literacy or numeracy or our behavioral outcomes and things like that are larger in the system. But at this point, we feel this was as deep as we could go and still have a meaningful, yes, if we apply this at the district level and work with everyone on this, it will have a meaningful impact on student outcomes.
And I think the one thing I would add is the root cause of a lot of these, going back, I think going in the history of Austin ISD has just been the lack of focused resources in these schools. that serve these students. Like that's like the biggest thing. It goes back decades. And so now, every one of these, even an application district-wide, where are we going to deploy our resources first? Where are we going to be overly concerned around staffing? Where are we going to make sure that professional development occurs, or that we're kind of thinking about the limited resources we have very, very strategically? And so, these root causes, I think sometimes they can be viewed as district-wide, and they are in many cases. But as you develop solutions around them, the implementation of those resources and those strategies have to be done in a way that kind of begin to try to offset the decades of disinvestment. And so, we even talk about, you go back to content interventionists. That's an investment we're making. We're organizing that in a way because we know, as Dr. Maxwell and Lakeisha just said, Ms. Drinks, that there are students who've been historically underserved that are going to need a disproportionate amount of intervention support. And there's no way that you get back to a healthy organization unless you have the investments, and that's directly correlated to those students groups in these schools. So I guess at the end of it all, it's that we haven't invested the way that we should have for decades in these schools. I don't know if that's makes clear, but now it's the opposite of it.
That's what I was about to say, is like maybe really focusing on where we are now,
Yeah.
where we're trying to head and how we're getting there, right? But I hear what you're saying. I'm just in one of those moods where I'm like, no, man, we got to focus on where we are now, where do we want to be, right? We can't look back. But kind of along those lines, right? I'm kind of hearing, and this is coming from a non-educator, so I don't know what I'm talking about. But but kind of hearing the conversation, I'm kind of picking up on, the use of research-based math practices. I'd love to hear anything else the administration would love to share on how those research-based math practices are being increased, right? The increased use of those. And I know it's not explicitly in the report, but, just as somebody who has kiddos and is going to be on that side in a little while, would love to hear anything the administration has to say with respect to how is some of this information getting to families, right? And maybe some of it is, and maybe some of it isn't. So would just love to hear the administration's comments on that.
Okay, so to get to the families, I'm going to start by the educators and then work to the families. So one of the great things about some of the resources we have, and especially even if they're not using STEM Scopes per se, which is our district approved one, most of the campuses that we don't see using that are using another really high quality instructional material. So it has these things embedded also. But some of those practices, even just thinking about something as simple as mathematical reasoning and term, how do you actually get kids to do that, right? Well, the teacher has to facilitate conversations that are asking students to dig deeper and explain their thinking about math and actually have opportunities for that. So that's a tiny example, but something like that we've strategically embedded in the use of the curriculum resources and how to do that every day. But then you're asking about how families know about this. Well, one of the great things about STEM Scopes, if our campuses are using that, is that every scope, which is like a unit kind of, comes with a parent support letter. And so this parent support letter is really great because it's a little one-pager. You can print it in English and in Spanish, and then we've shown directions on how you can actually translate it into other home languages also. It may not be the exact best translation, to be fair, but it's through Google, so it's still pretty strong. But those are actually not only going to talk about the math itself of what students are learning, but it gives ideas on what they can actually work with students on at home to help support without the teacher having to come up with ideas or choice boards or these things. So they're very engaging activities that they can collaborate on together. Simple things. Sometimes it's asking certain types of questions about math to students, or sometimes it's looking for something in your house, everyday life math, things like that. As far as going back to the research-based practices, we've been really talking about this a lot. So my little team, we're responsible for the elementary math curriculum. And so we wanted to make sure that teachers felt supported to actually deliver the material, because it is high level, it's grade level material. But the supports that are embedded also talk about the tools that students need to be using in order to effectively promote math, but also utilize it and make it real for them. And so that's up front in the unit, whereas like if we just sent them straight into the curriculum resource of STEM scopes, you kind of have to dig to find where that's at. So we tried to draw out all of those best things, the use of academic language and what they could use. We really wanted to inspire conversations, so we created pre-made sentence stems that they could do to go with their high-level questioning so that students are engaging in math. We tell them what manipulatives you're going to need during this unit so they can already have them ready, accessible for themselves to model, but also for the students to always be able to access. Again, I could go on and on, so I'll stop. But there's just, we want to always draw that out. And then when we're doing, our professional support's a little bit different this year than what we had in the past, just because they're still writing the curriculum documents. But the things that we are doing, for example, the upcoming PLC lead, like we're taking it and taking bite-sized chunks of it and really working deeply so that when they go back, now we're sending these folks off to then promote that across all of the campuses because everyone's PLCing in math and having these conversations. So we're trying our best to make sure that it's more there for them. It's more right there. They can see those best practices. They can see what needs to be done. And then the last thing I'll say is we've intentionally designed the MTSS walkthrough for classrooms, which our leaders are getting support with, and our coaches are understanding, and our teachers understand what they're being, what's being looked for in their classrooms, to specify it. So that it doesn't just say, if I go in Dr. Maxwell's room during math, you know, I want to see kids engaged and I want to see this. No, it's like, I want to see lesson alignment. I want to see the rigor. I want to see grade level materials. I want to see relevant math learning. I want to see engagement from students. I want to see cross-curricular connection, cross-linguistic connections if it's a DL classroom. I want to see all of this. I want to see them reasoning and grappling with math. It's just so it's a little easier to comprehend, because math sometimes, again, we learned it differently than we're asking educators to really teach kids how to do it. So if we don't make those connections and really help them understand what they need to do or see, the only people who it stands to hurt are the kids, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen. So.
Yeah, and I love. Let me ask: are there any other?
I was just going to say, just a friendly reminder to, and maybe this was an LSG compliant question, but just friendly reminder. Thank you.
I used the script. I did. Okay. So on that note, again, thank you for the comments shared freely by the administration. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Trustee Whitley-Chu.
My questions have been asked by my colleagues and answered by the administration. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustees, any more questions? Yes, Dr.
I just have a quick follow-up to something that you had said earlier, Dr. Maxwell, about the assessment in the language of assessment. Could you clarify, just for understanding this data that you presented to us, what the language of assessment is for the data that's being presented to us?
The language of assessment is in English.
For all students?
In math in second grade, yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thanks. Anyone else? Oh, yes. Trustee Zapata.
Sparked up a question when you mentioned how you share the information with parents. So how do you measure or count the parents? How do they receive the information, and how do you know that parents are using it?
Trustee Zapata, I think that's a great question, but probably not something that would fit our definition of LSG questions, and I apologize, but I'm wondering, Superintendent.
I can reach out.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Thank you. Thank you all so much. All right. So let's see. We thank you, trustees, and thank you to our staff for that presentation. So I wanted to, make sure I'm in the right spot. All right, trustees, if you have I think this was really interesting. We now have to vote on whether or not we will accept this monitoring report. As a point of clarity, we are voting to accept this report as a formal acknowledgement that we had a satisfactory conversation with the superintendent and have a deeper understanding about how the current reality for students lined up with our vision for them. So at this point, I will entertain a motion for the acceptance of this monitoring report. Secretary Boswell, do I have a motion to accept the monitoring report?
Yes, I move to accept the monitoring report.
Is there a second?
I second.
Having a motion by Secretary Boswell and a second by Trustee Zapata to accept the monitoring report. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. The motion passes unanimously. So thank you very much, trustees, for taking part in our shared commitment to students and student outcomes. And next up, we have a presentation on the Constraint Progress Measure 5.1, Social and Emotional Learning. So tonight's presentation on our constraints has actually been recorded and can be found in board docs under agenda item 4.2 for all watching at home. Our time during this meeting will be an opportunity for trustees to ask questions of our superintendent and staff. We have scheduled 15 minutes for this discussion, and the time does not count towards our student outcome and special education focus. So before we ask questions, do we need to confirm that our monitoring report is complete? And does anyone have evidence that the elements of an effective monitoring report are not present? Okay. So since everyone agrees that the required elements are present, we will turn the floor to Superintendent Segura.
Thank you, President Singh. Trustees, I'd like to invite Stacia Paschal, Director of Social Emotional Learning and Cultural Proficiency and Inclusiveness, to answer any questions that you may have. As a note to our community, it was previously recorded. And as we, again, move through the updating of monitoring reports, I think it's always going to be important that we provide some context. And so what I wanted to share with our community and to our board was that Austin ISD values creating and sustaining a culture of respect, employee well-being, and promoting educational equity. Respect, well-being, and educational equity are the foundational cornerstones of our promise to our families and staff when they choose to be part of Austin ISD. To create and sustain this culture, it requires a commitment to intentional practices that foster environments that are caring and just. The moment students and staff walk into our buildings, they should feel that sense of belonging and connectedness. And again, this is all tied back to our constraint, right? It's all about the scorecard. Our walls are a reflection of the community and the joy of learning. Students are greeted by their names, and someone shares a smile with them so they know they are trusted adults on campus. Many of us have had teachers that we remember because they made us feel seen and valued. And it's a promise that began in 2011 through our district-wide implementation of SEL, Social Emotional Learning. At this time, we started working with Dr. Bruce Perry to better understand what is needed to support these needs for students. And at that time, we began a series of professional developments, both with senior leaders, and then later on, several years later, I believe even the board engaged in some of the professional development. And as one of Castle's early cohorts of collaborating district initiative, we have a rich history of SEL implementation, beginning with Crockett Early College High School, it wasn't called Crockett Early College High School at that time, and Austin High vertical teams in the 2011 and 2012 school years. Our implementation practices have contributed to Castle's research, and our success has brought districts far and wide from Central Texas, Georgia, and New Mexico to learn about how we do school in Austin ISD. In 2021, Austin ISD continued to be a pioneer in SEL, and we combined our SEL and Cultural Proficiency and Inclusiveness Department. To understand social and emotional learning, we must first acknowledge that we as individuals have diverse backgrounds that shape our self-regulations, social interactions, and decision-making abilities. Cultural proficiency begins with self-reflection and awareness of our own identities, biases, and cultural lenses. This self-awareness enables us to build stronger relationships with others, value diverse perspectives, and foster a growth mindset. These social and emotional skills developed through this process are essential for creating inclusive and equitable environments. The SEL and CP&I department is now utilizing Castle's definition of transformative SEL to define Austin's implementation practices and mindsets. So here in Constraint 5.1, social and emotional learning allows us to inventory where campuses are in their implementation journey using the SEL and CP&I measuring tool. We focus our professional learning, transformative SEL integrated instruction, and cultural responsiveness as a three-pronged approach to creating and sustaining a culture of respect, employee well-being, and educational equity. Our students have been impacted by the recent rise of online threats, lockdowns, bullying, and other school-related stressors. In order for them to be prepared to learn, we have to tend to their psychological safety and increase their sense of belonging. And so by utilizing the measuring tool this year, and our tool as previously approved on June 20th, we will, we'll be implementing it's a benchmark year, and we aim to set targeted campus goals. And so for those of you following along at home, whenever we had a constraint or a goal where we didn't have previous data, we would actually start a benchmark year, and that's the year that we currently are in. And so this tool will help us identify specific barriers that campuses may face in implementing SEL and CP&I initiatives. And ultimately, measuring the implementation of transformative SEL is about ensuring that every student feels seen, heard, and valued. By tracking our progress, we can celebrate our successes, identify areas of growth, and ultimately create a more compassionate and equitable learning environment for all. And so, as I said, there's a lot of work, a lot of support in the development of the tool, and Stacia put together a great recording, which is available online. And so we'd like to answer any questions the board may have at this time.
Thank you. Trustees, are there any questions that you all have? And as a reminder, if we have asked questions that are of a technical or tactical nature before tonight's meeting, those questions and their answers are posted on board docs. So just Google Austin ISD board docs and BOARDOCS, and you'll find it. BOARD and then DOCS. Yeah, 2 words. And our questions during the meeting will be of a strategic nature. So, questions? Yes.
I have one clarification on tactical that came up from a constituent question after the materials were released publicly. Can I ask that?
Sure.
Hello, thanks for joining us. Is Character Strong available and provided to our teachers in Spanish?
The button. Look at there. I get to use all of my transformative SEL skills from the very beginning. Good evening, President Singh, Superintendent Segura. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share what our vision of transformative SEL looks like in the district. Your question is very specific about Character Strong, and so I'm going to answer to the part which I own, and then I'm going to invite my colleague to fill in the rest. Character Strong is an initiative that has come to us through our MTSS department. My department is working in collaboration with Character Strong to align our locally created scope and sequence and implementing Character Strong resources with that. But to be able to answer that more specifically, I'm inviting my colleague for an opportunity for collaborative problem solving.
Good evening again. So you said that very, very well. So we definitely do have a couple of resources here, and it's really going to take us as a team to make sure that we're valuing everything that not only that we're bringing in, but that we have done and the amazing work there. So that is the process, that's the journey we're starting on. The answer to your question is yes, it is offered in Spanish.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it so much. All right, so now we must vote on whether or not we will accept this monitoring report. As a point of clarity, we are voting to accept this report as a formal acknowledgement that we had a satisfactory conversation and have a deeper understanding about how the current reality lines up with our vision. So, Secretary Boswell, do we have a motion?
Before I make a motion, I just want to direct I appreciate all the questions my colleagues asked and want to direct our community to the Q&A that's in our document. That's on board docs. So thank you. And yes, I move to accept this monitoring report.
Great.
And thank you for your presentation.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Having a motion by Secretary Boswell and a second by Trustee Zapata to accept the monitoring report. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. The motion passes unanimously by all those on the dais. Thank you. All right. And now we will move to our next item. But before we dive into the TEA order strategic plan conversation. I did want to mention that as part of the agreed order with the Texas Education Agency, the agreement requires that the board shall, at the first board authorized public meeting each month, publicly report by reading into the record A, the percentage of time invested in student outcomes during the prior 3-month time period, and B, the total time spent in closed session during the prior month. So the August, September, and October 3-month average board meeting time spent on Lone Star governance, defined student outcomes, and special education monitoring was 77.63%. We have exceeded our target of 50%. For the last month, which is October, we were at 46.51%. The board spent 283 minutes in executive session in September, yes. Did we want to say September or October? October. Okay, 283 minutes in exec session in October. So, thank you. And thank you, board, for, working so hard to stay in compliance with those minutes and focus on student outcomes. So we will now move to our information, reports, and updates. Our first item is a review of our special education strategic plan, which is part of our agreed order and counts towards our discussion on student outcomes and special education minutes. So, Mr. Segura.
Thank you, President Singh, Board of Trustees. Tonight we have Dr. Drew Robinette, Assistant Superintendent for Special Education, as well as Dr. Cherry Lee, Executive Director of Inclusion and Instructional Delivery. And so we will provide a quarterly update on the strategic plan for special education. This is a requirement in the TA agreed order. And as a reminder, this is our district's strategic plan for special education and not only a departmental plan. So one of the things that we continue to reinforce here in Austin ISD is that this is owned by every single division within Austin ISD. This illustrates our shared ownership and system collaboration in support of over 13,000 students receiving special education services in our district. Dr. Baker is not with us tonight. You see her many times, but she is not here with us because she serves on the executive board of the Texas Association of School Psychologists and is currently presenting at their annual conference. And so to set the stage for this evening's presentation, we wanted to highlight the flow of activities related to the implementation of the plan. And as part of the TA agreed order, the district was required to develop a strategic plan for special education utilizing a third-party audit. And the audit was conducted by Stetson and Associates and completed this past spring. And if you recall, Dr. Stetson provided a presentation based on her findings. The special education team then developed and provided the strategic plan to TEA on April 30th, and the plan was later shared publicly and reviewed at the board information session on June 6th of 2024. The strategic plan was developed from findings from the earlier Austin ISD program evaluation conducted by Stetson in 2022, which identified 5 areas of improvement. The TA agreed order signed in September 2023 and the audit in 2024. Based on these data sources, along with feedback from the community and our Special Education Family Advisory Committee, the CFAC, the team developed a strategic plan to be implemented in the next 3 years. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Robinette to take us through the remainder of the presentation.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, Superintendent Segura and trustees. The Special Education Strategic Plan has 5 main goals and tenets that are listed on the screen. Those include the inclusive vision through shared ownership, high-quality instruction within a multi-tiered systems of support, or MTSS, high-quality individualized education programs, or IEPs, and improved student outcomes and accountability. The plan's 5 areas have aligned strategies and actions, which are reflected on the screen as well, to really improve services for students with disabilities in our district. In the following slides, we'll provide a deeper view of these components and provide progress monitoring on specific milestones and really actions to date. Inclusive practices and family engagement are woven throughout the plan in each of the respective areas as well. So the first goal of inclusive vision through shared ownership, we really call this the heartbeat of the plan because we know to be in closer alignment not only with our desires and meeting the needs of students with disabilities, great neurodiversity, we also want to be in greater alignment with our district's vision of being truly Austin's inclusive home for our students. And so the first goal of inclusive vision is also through shared ownership. As Superintendent Segura mentioned, every member of the system, every person in our community has an opportunity to really support the full realization of this plan. And that's why it's intentionally called not the Special Education Strategic Plan, but Austin ISD's Strategic Plan for Special Education. So the strategies in inclusive vision through shared ownership include the promotion of our commitment to serving students with disabilities through inclusive practices, the development of district communication plan and a cadence of messaging and parent newsletters, and the development also of superintendent messaging each semester. Likewise, this message and the inclusive vision that are rooted in what we call the guiding principles of inclusion that were co-developed really resonates with an expectation through our campuses for that work to continue. We know that an important part of achieving an inclusive vision for students requires frequent, aligned, and consistent communication throughout our school district, with everyone championing on behalf of students at all levels. So there's intentional and prioritized communication as part of what we're doing that has been underway and that will continue each 9 weeks. For example, the Superintendent's Week Ahead during the first week of schools highlighted the guiding principles for inclusion and also reinforced the emphasis of this framework to guide our campuses and our educators in better meeting the needs of students and families. In addition, guiding principles for inclusion have been highlighted as part of the Leadership Institute for all of our principals, all of our assistant principals, and all of our executive directors to really serve as a framework to examine district-wide and campus-based practices more aligned to desired inclusive practices for all children. We know that when there's greater inclusion with high expectations for students in our settings, then that leads to greater outcomes for kids, and that has been fully documented in research. These guiding principles have likewise been highly highlighted in our newly revised special education website, our staff onboarding packets in partnership with our talent strategy team, and they're also aligned with our district values of being a more inclusive community, in this case, particularly for students with neurodiversity on individualized education programs. So we're going to talk about that in addition to the way in which this inclusive vision through shared ownership tenet really builds upon professional development and community-based engagement with transparency for our staff and our caregivers. So far to date, the professional development touch points for shared ownerships have emphasized our district's obligation and opportunity to serve all students from an asset-based lens, one that is with intention across our campuses, and we understand that this work is just beginning and must be ongoing and persistent for true system transformation. So you'll see the implementation of professional development. Our 24-25 professional development calendar has a continuum of supports built in terms of an emphasis on quality service delivery and moving from a program orientation driven by disability, which was an area of deficit for our district, and we continue to work on making that more of a strengths service delivery model and with specific structures in support of students. So we're going to take a deeper dive. With that continued this work, we've also have continued to see and are already starting to see some promising indicators of increases in the percentages of students being appropriately served in general education classrooms with the appropriate related supports. That makes for a better school community, it makes for a better Austin ISD, and it certainly makes for a better Austin. So what's that look like? Just the inclusive messaging from our superintendent. Here are just a few examples of the described milestones to date noted in action. These are artifacts, these are evidence. So newsletters around that inclusive vision and messaging with shared ownership has come from our superintendent. Also those inclusive practices, as I mentioned, has been partnering with communications. We've been partnering with the Department of Communications and Community Engagement as well well to make sure that that is embedded throughout this year. We want to thank our superintendent for celebrating and awarding teaching assistants. These 4 were across Rosedale, Sunset Valley, and Harris with Golden Raves. And our highest recognition for Teaching Assistant Recognition Week, which was the last week in September. He also awarded dyslexia interventionist Jessica Gomez, a dedicated dyslexia interventionist at Palm Elementary School, a Golden Rave in October. These special awards and the publicizing of them really illustrate and elevate across Austin ISD's communication channels and social media that we acknowledge and celebrate not only special education providers, but the richness of the students that they serve and that we all serve as providers and supporters in our district and part of the AISD family. So expect more of these providers to be honored in the upcoming months, and especially in support of our students and inclusive practices. All right. In addition, I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge some upcoming special events related to Inclusive Schools Week, and we'll talk about that when we get to that next portion of the slide. Okay. We want to highlight the work of our amazing special educational instructional team for partnering, delivering informative and meaningful family learning opportunities through our Family Empower Hours. Again, this is about building capacity and shared ownership with an inclusive focus across our system. These examples that are written in the strategic plan really come to life when we have intentional planning and really engaged interactions with folks. So on the screen, you'll see some screenshots of our Family Empower Hours for this school year that are scheduled thus far. That's always an iterative process, as well as some of the transition efforts that have been underway, and our Special Education Family Advisory Council structure meetings, all of which are aligned to strategies and Goal 1. So there's a few highlights. In September, the Austin ISD transition team hosted transition services parent information session for high school parents, secondary parents overall, and the event drew about 50 participants on a Saturday, and that demonstrates to us a strong interest in post-secondary planning, coordinated support, and independent living skills. An important goal for this session was to strengthen students and families' access and understanding of how to more successfully navigate the transition process with greater confidence. And then in October, you'll notice on the left, we partnered with Vela Families, a community nonprofit, to provide a 3-part interactive virtual series geared to support parents in understanding the ARD process, including alignment of IEP goals, services, progress reporting. And so sessions were offered in Spanish and English. Vela has been a longstanding and positive partner in our district, and they were well attended as well. In addition, in October, the dyslexia team hosted our 10th annual Central Texas Dyslexia Conference, in which there were 8 virtual asynchronous sessions available on demand that were available for staff and community members, and also a sponsoring of a movie screening of Hopeville around literacy at the Austin ISD Performing Arts Center. This was to really build awareness of dyslexia and really the importance of high-quality literacy instruction. This was generously sponsored. You gave them a shout out earlier today. 2 times we're going to bring this up, by the Austin Ed Fund. Over 200 people attended these events. In addition, over 30 campuses held watch parties and engaged in a variety of activities to really inform this process. Last but not least, we successfully hosted our inaugural Austin ISD Transition Fair on October 12th. The event, likewise funded by a grant from the Austin Ed Fund, attracted over 100 participants, including students with disabilities, their families, and representatives from 35 Austin ISD and Austin community organizations. I'm going to be honest, I think of leading with love, and look at you, Trustee Zapata. We said, let's start small, and it grew into 35 very, very quickly, and so that community spark and that connection is powerful. And I think one of the greatest feedback pieces that we heard is there are transition events that are hosted in the Central Texas area that Austin has participated in that are not located here, but they're very, very large events, and we will continue to promote those in the spring. But this was more of a nested event where parents, at least those who communicated with us, felt that they could truly engage in some real conversations and learn some key critical strategies or tools perhaps they weren't familiar with, to be able to utilize specifically for their child and just to learn more about it. So there was some valuable information about that. I think I got well ahead of myself, so hold on one moment. This is why we have Dr. Reach in the background for support. You've also heard in some earlier presentations some of the professional development for our instructional staff. And I'd like to highlight the incredibly dedicated supportive teaching assistants that we have. So we have over 1,000 teaching assistants who support in our district, specifically in support of children, almost 1,000, for students on IEPs or with neurodiversity receiving special education services. We really value those professional learning opportunities, and I want to talk about trying to be a responsive organization. We had been providing for quite some time some virtual backpacks and some learning tools and some dispersed learning opportunities on campuses for our teaching assistants. But if you recall, just at the Welcome Back event that the superintendent held at the PAC, there were questions about how we can continue to fortify and strengthen real deeper opportunities for our teaching assistants. Well, that spurred us into action. Thank you for the guidance. And so we held 2 separate sessions in October, on October 3rd for elementary and October 14th for our secondary folks. And so they came in person. This is the first time they had been in person to an event for quite some time. I have to admit that although there were some really strong sessions on positive behavior strategies, implementation of behavior intervention plans, data collections, and using visuals to support communication, there's also something special about being in community with other people. That was a byproduct that we didn't necessarily even plan for. That helps us to build greater retention in our system, and that likewise helps us to build greater capacity among our teaching assistants, where they can likewise learn from one another outside of the specific learning intentions that we had in mind. The feedback from sessions, because you often ask for those metrics, was very positive. The average rating was about 4.4 out of 5. Not about, it was 4.4 out of 5. We just had a numeracy presentation, so I should be more specific with my mathematical calculations here. But specific examples of what worked was an appreciation for the training on implementation of accommodations and modification strategies to support, also how to support students' regulation, sensory needs, and the opportunity to collaborate and connect with other teaching assistants. Feedback on areas of growth, because those opinions likewise matter very critically, was on how recommendations for us to consider increased differentiation of opportunities of learning sequences for our teaching assistants. We were very appreciative that the experience led to more hunger for learning, more desire to get better, and we see that across our valiantly serving teaching assistants and personnel across our system. So Dr. Lee's going to take us through the navigation of some of the strategic plan progress updates for goals 2, 3, and 4, and I'll come back in to wrap it up for goal 5.
Thank you. Good evening. So the third goal within our strategic plan is the delivery of high-quality instruction within a multi-tiered systems of support. And earlier this fall, you received a TEA order update on MTSS. So to recap, we've developed and rolled out our new MTSS manual and framework. We've updated our curriculum documents, provided training on intervention platforms, and are conducting MTSS walkthroughs. And along with these efforts, we've emphasized the partnership and collaboration across general education and special education for teachers during planning and PLCs. Now, actually, the same day that we launched our elementary TA symposium, Sloan McLean from the Creative Learning Initiative and I partnered to provide 3 virtual sessions of Universal Design for Learning for teachers on October 3rd. And when I had presented with Dr. Reach back in September, I had shared a few slides of an upcoming UDL presentation featured on the left. And so that presentation actually happened there at the PAC. It was virtual. And the goal of the presentation was for participants to help identify and apply both UDL and CLI strategies to meet the diverse needs of students, to ignite curiosity and empower all learners to succeed. The presentation was available for all staff, and it provided examples of how UDL and CL&I strategies can be used across our curriculum and really help to improve student agency and comprehension of complex ideas. It builds on the required training identified in the TEA agreed order that was delivered prior to the start of school, or back on August the 14th or 15th, depending on when schools delivered that training. The presentation was well received and attended by over 700 teachers across the district. So pictured on the right is a visual model that a science teacher shared during the engagement opportunities baked into the presentation. And the photo represented an example of how this specific teacher builds student interest, motivation, and processing of complex concepts. By providing regular opportunities for training campus teams on universal design for learning and creative learning initiative strategies, we set the stage for strong first teach across all learning environments. So fulfillment of evaluation requirements will be discussed in more detail in January as part of a scorecard update on the evaluation progress, but I do want to highlight just a few updates related to this component. So first, our team developed and launched a streamlined one-page referral document for campuses to complete when submitting evaluation requests based on feedback gathered in the Stetson 2024 audit process, and then further recommendations in the strategic plan. So I'm also going to highlight some additional progress activities that are included in our Child Find awareness activities. So our evaluation and early childhood teams support Child Find initiatives and were invited to present at the United Way Family-Based Care Conference back in August. We presented to over 60-plus child care workers supporting families and children of non-enrolled students within the Austin area on creating environments for successful routines and learning, as well as early childhood intervention programs and special education services here in Austin ISD. Ongoing partnerships with our community early childhood intervention agencies like Any Baby Can and Easter Seals support effective transition services for children with suspected or identified disabilities. Our department's ECI transition specialist, the wonderful Michelle McGee, meets weekly with case managers and families from these agencies to ensure timely referral, evaluation, and special education services. In September, our team offered 2 virtual sessions for families on Child Find, which explained how our district identifies and evaluates students who may need special education services. We covered referral, evaluation, and eligibility, and the presentation is available on our external website. And speaking of our external website, and connecting the work of CFAC to improvements in Child Find awareness activities, 4 of our CFAC members graciously dedicated their time and served on a website review subcommittee, and their recommendations included user experience and improvements to the Child Find pages on our website. Our website specialist team member here at Austin ISD made those updates to our website, and you can review them now. And lastly, our team developed a comprehensive evaluation manual that consolidated information on procedures related to referral and evaluation and clearly outlines responsibilities for evaluators, for campus leaders, and for special education staff. We've also consolidated the information and made it accessible to families in Spanish and English, and it's also on our external website. These manuals will be updated annually to reflect any changes to local procedures or state and federal regulations. Again, additional updates regarding evaluation productivity will be provided at our January board meeting. So the 4th goal within the strategic plan outlines the development and implementation of high-quality IEPs. Actions include building campus capacity to engage families in the ARD process, the provision of differentiated instruction for staff, and increased monitoring of IEP quality. We've also created a cadence for reviewing selected folders for IEP compliance, which we rolled out to principals in September. Campus IEP reviews are in progress, and I'll share metrics shortly. The next few slides will further examine progress towards reaching these goals. Some of the deliverables related to this component in the strategic plan include partnership with principals to build capacity for engaging with families through the ARD process. In April of 2024, we developed a half-day blended training, which included a guidance and reflection document based on the content of the module to be used by campuses to establish consistency across the district. As part of the training, campus administrators led staff through an in-person guided PLC where they co-developed goals and strategies individualized to their own campus needs and communities. The purpose of this activity was to aid the campuses in taking stronger actions toward making the parent role in the ARD committee more meaningful for both parents and staff. And once campus teams identified goals, they developed at least 2 actions to support achievement of their goals. And here are some examples developed by campus teams. Our goal is to increase the quality of feedback from teachers for ARD meetings in order that parents feel more connected to what's happening in the classroom. Here's another goal. Our goal is to be more intentional about the educational language and jargon used in ARD meetings. Now, at the Leadership Institute in July, our team provided campus leadership teams an opportunity to revisit these goals and consider how they would implement these actions to continue to build engagement. Throughout additional principal meetings and required training, the AISD developed our process to build family engagement is revisited. Another district action to increase engagement was to institute a requirement for case managers to introduce themselves to families. As part of beginning of the year procedures, case managers provide a welcome letter explaining how and when progress will be reported and their contact information. In October, our department partnered with VELA to provide training to our parent support specialists across the district. The 2-hour training covered special education services and parents' perspectives and rights and key resources that parent support specialists could use to support families in their communities. Our special education team will also develop a survey which will be shared with families in the spring of 2025, very similar to the one that was provided to families as part of the Stetson audit in 2024, to assess these fortified efforts to improve family engagement. In order to build campus leader knowledge of the special education process as outlined in our strategic plan, we provide focused and timely training at monthly roundtable meetings and routine communication through leadership weekly memos. In September, our team introduced the IEP quality rubric to principals as a tool to evaluate the quality of IEPs. Beginning in late September, and as a part of the monthly campus support visits, our special education coordinators conduct an IEP quality review using our quality review rubric alongside with principals. To date, over 200 IEP reviews have been conducted at all Austin ISD campuses. Speaking generally, findings show that areas of strength include IEP goals and informing parents of the frequency of progress monitoring. Areas of growth include using a variety of data sources within present levels of academic achievement and functional performance statements, or PLAFs, which is an important component of the IEP. As part of the strategic plan and the TEA agreed order, we trained our special education teachers, related service providers, SLPs, dyslexia interventionists, diagnosticians, and school psychologists on August 13th on the development of legally compliant IEPs. The training emphasized alignment of PLAFs, goals, services, and progress monitoring and reporting, and it was anchored by the IEP quality rubric. Over 1,500 special education team members attended this full-day session across 3 campuses. In addition to the IEP review process, our teams are also conducting fidelity of implementation walkthroughs. 20 elementary, 10 middle school, and 10 high school campuses were randomly selected to participate in year 1 of this walkthrough process, where a small group of special education department staff and campus administrators conduct walkthroughs to evaluate the quality of special education services. Selected campuses had their first round of walkthroughs in late September and early October. During the classroom walkthroughs, we're looking for evidence of implementation of 3 components. 1, instructional accommodations and/or curriculum modifications are evident. 2, standards-based general education curriculum is the framework for instructional delivery. And 3, the role of the teacher and teaching assistants are appropriate to provide specially designed instruction. Additionally, these 3 components are now integrated into the PPFT, or Professional Pathways for Teachers appraisal walkthrough documents across core instruction. Now, as the year progresses, we'll review these findings as the data comes in from the submission of these walkthroughs across the year to review trends and need for improvement. Now, this slide provides examples of visuals of implementation of high-quality services actually taken during our walkthroughs in campuses where individualized supports and accommodations are being provided. From writing to early numeracy and fine motor development, examples of high-quality and inclusive instruction is shown. To date, we've conducted walkthroughs across 18 campuses and 80 classrooms. On November 5th, additional training was provided to all instructional staff, which that was just this week, this Tuesday, which examined the continuum of services provided across the district. Aligned with the TEA agreed order and strategic plan, the course emphasized the following concepts: rigorous instruction regardless of instructional setting, and FAPE, which is a free appropriate public education to students with disabilities in the least restrictive environment, or LRE. Similar to previous training rollouts, staff completed an asynchronous course that was followed by an in-person campus administrator-led workshop to personalize learning and move towards application of concepts. Another action in our strategic plan is to ensure effective implementation of high-leverage practices. During walkthroughs and campus visits, our team is looking for evidence identified of 3 specific practices called out in the TEA order, like differentiation of instruction, culturally and linguistically responsive instruction, and universal design for learning. These practices inform our professional learning and coaching visits across general and special education settings. Pictured here are specialized services in action, including a dyslexia intervention lesson, use of assistive technology, and personalized visual schedules. To support improvements in the development of high-quality IEPs, including the development of PLAFs, teachers may be routed to or may self-select to attend asynchronous trainings through our Professional Learning System, or HCP, and they may also receive side-by-side in-person coaching from an instructional specialist or coordinator during a PLC. To support improvements in the implementation of services, teachers may be routed or may select in-person, synchronous, or asynchronous virtual options to improve implementation of behavior management, use of assistive technology, and reading or math instruction. Our specialists and coordinators also provide coaching and supports for teachers in real time who have not met IEP development standards. As an example, our dyslexia team has provided 25 courses since June of 2024 to ensure that the almost 450 teachers who provide dyslexia intervention are trained to implement the programs with fidelity. Our behavior support team has trained over 125 staff members on functional behavior assessments and behavior intervention plans, and an additional 229 staff members on CPI, which is a de-escalation and crisis intervention program. Also wanted to highlight our newly adopted specially designed social skills curriculum. Rethink Ed is a comprehensive intervention curriculum designed to support students receiving special education services with a focus on social skills, self-regulation, and positive behavior from kindergarten through high school. Almost 160 special education teachers have been trained to implement this curriculum so far, and training is ongoing and continues in the spring. Furthermore, on January 29th, our team will be leading a half-day training with 9 sessions that will be curated and aligned with the needs identified in the walkthroughs and the IEP review process. Some of the sessions will include a half-day specially designed math training, and sessions will also provide information on use of assistive technology.
So ultimately, moving into Section 5, the strategic actions and outputs from the strategic plan's first 4 focus areas should lead to improved student outcomes and accountability. We have already identified and seen improved outcomes in our compliance with more timely evaluation structures, for example. And likewise, we have worked to carefully examine and resolve compliance concerns with our vendor. As you know, we have recently announced, this was part of a goal on our plan, that we've recently announced to the community a desire to review additional data management systems that may be perhaps better suited to meet the compliance needs as well as our user interface. This is at a very early stage, but in terms of progress and updates, we just held our first series of listening sessions, or actually 2 series of listening sessions in the last couple of weeks that are already underway, and those have been very insightful. Thank you to the Superintendent's Office and Joshua Jean for partnering to lead those alongside our team. 2 additional strategies associated with the Goal 5 of the plan include improved progress on outcomes for students receiving services in alignment with the progress measures and data included in board scorecard monitoring for all student groups. So you just did that this evening, and that's important, not only for the community to know, but the agency sees that very embedded in the progress that our students are making. The team will continue to monitor leading and lagging indicators along with you as trustees based on your scorecard and monitoring reports, some of which may hone in specifically on the service delivery of students receiving special education services, and some that may be more generalized but specifically look at all student groups in our system. That includes these children as well, our children as well. Further, our talent strategy team is already commencing an analysis on appropriate staffing comparisons and structures for us to successfully address student needs in light of shortages, high demand service providers, including evaluation staff, speech and related service, and special education support staff. Findings from their analysis will inform planning needs for the spring and preparation for the next fiscal year. And we're working in partnership with them, as well as our finance team and the budget office as well, our chief financial officer. As greater capacity is built and supported from the district at campus levels as well for more aligned learning and practices, those practices are better supported and monitored. We expect to see improvements in the experiences for students on IEPs and their families in our district. It also makes for a better Austin ISD. A significant investment in district-wide learning has been underway. You certainly heard that this evening and have been hearing that in the respective reports associated with the TEA agreed order, and in this case, our specific strategic plan. But there's been a specific and particular emphasis as well on campus and district administrators, all instructional staff, all related service providers, not just limited to special education personnel. This was a foundational shift for our district overall and helps us to be more aligned to being Austin's home for inclusive learning. The foundational work reinforces a shared ownership and a vision and collectively meeting the needs of all students, including and particularly those receiving special education services. For upcoming checkpoints on the screen, TEA order updates and progress on the strategic plan is already built into your board monitoring calendar, and the public can see that as well about what's coming up throughout the year on your respective board docs and agendas. That's already been agendized. And likewise, touch points are built into our CFAC meetings as well. Like you, we've gotten the CFAC is a very engaged team, and so we learned from the first session. They might like for us to do some quick videos, et cetera, so that they can dig into the work even more and really engage in partnership, which we did much more of at the second meeting. So we're all learning from this process together. As a detailed document being supported throughout our system, the strategic plan for special education provides us a framework for building inclusive schools, compliant practices, and really high-quality special education services for students. There was a question in one of the board docs, and it is a living document that may be revised and have internal timelines for specific action steps modified to be more responsive to our system overall. Last but not least, the team looks forward to providing additional progress updates to you and sharing concrete metrics for outputs, some of which we've already woven into this evening's presentation, but ultimately we're looking forward to continuing to see those upward trends and better outcomes in service of our exceptional learners. This concludes our presentation this evening. Thanks for listening, and we're available for clarification questions.
Thank you so much. Trustees, are there any questions? No questions? Okay, this has been a very, very thorough report, so I would take that as a good job. I think I do have one question. Sure. Can you talk a little bit more about how you are sort of doing sort of quality checks on the IEPs?
You want to speak to it? Or go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So our team back in August and September, under the direction and in partnership with our TEA monitors, and also based on feedback from the 2024 audit, reviewed various materials to craft and develop a rubric. And what we ended up doing is we adopted a rubric that TEA had developed And we took that rubric and we added and tweaked just a few parts. So we actually think that we enhanced the rubric, right? We recommend that TA go back and update the rubric to align with ours, right? We enhanced it just a bit. And then what we did in our August 13th Job Alike training that I spoke of, as well as principal roundtables, is we introduced that rubric and we walked participants through the sections of the rubric and we gave them examples, and we gave them examples of what would meet quality and what wouldn't be quality. And then we also gave participants an opportunity to draft improved statements based on what we had provided. So we gave non-examples and examples, and we let them actually practice drafting those statements. And so the walkthrough or the IEP rigor and review rubric is used during these monthly campus coordinator visits. So the campus coordinator goes to the campus, they sit down with the principal, and the principal and them select one IEP per month, and they partner and they move through the rubric and evaluate components. Was this component present or was it not? Something that we've gotten a lot of great feedback from principals and coordinators as well about the effectiveness of this. And something that principals want, and I think it's a really natural and organic process, is they want teachers, special education teachers, to actually sit down with coordinators and with each other in partnership to routinely review IEPs as part of their PLC. So this is a really amazing practice for our new and our veteran teachers to sit side by side. I mean, these are very complex legal documents that our teachers are crafting, and many of our teachers are fairly new to the field. Many of our administrators were not previously special education teachers, right? So they may have reviewed IEPs, they may have sat in ARD meetings, special education meetings, but they didn't develop those IEPs, right? So it's been a really powerful and effective practice for both our administrators as well as our special education teachers. Yeah.
That's really impressive to know. Have you seen, like, do you have a way to say, like...
Your mic is not on.
Do you have a way of saying, like, okay, 75% of our,
We do.
plans?
We do.
Yeah, they do.
And
Okay.
so that we actually, all of that information is inputted into a digital document. And so we have the evidence of the performance and the metrics for each component within that IEP. And so we're able to identify trends per campus as well as just, for elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. And also, we use that data to then determine what kind of training do we need to see at the individual campus level and at district-wide. Is it in the area of PLAFs? Is it in the area of goals? Is it in the area of, developing those instructional services? So we definitely take all of that data and it informs all of the training that we do. Campus principals appreciate it because it helps identify, teachers that need additional support and training on demand, right? So I need to support this teacher in this way, and then we're able to provide our instructional specialists and our coordinators and connect those supports directly with those teachers. And like I said, we have asynchronous opportunities, we have synchronous opportunities, and then we have real-time in-person support at those PLC meetings.
I'd like to add, to just make no mistake, we have growth to have in front of us. We have a lot of learning and growth to do in terms of this. And what this process is really designed to not only create a better document or a better program, an IEP program for a student, and really meet the needs of that child, but it's likewise developed to create greater capacity. This isn't about giving the best example that someone has right in front of us so that everyone can get a perfect check on everything. We need to really see where our strengths are and where areas of deficit and need are. And so part of this is really in a generalized paragraph in the order and more articulated here in the plan itself, but it says continue to provide ongoing coaching and progress and supports for folks on FOI or fidelity of implementation of IEPs, as well as the crafting of legally compliant or high quality IEPs. And so the pieces that over the course of the year, we anticipate having about 1,000.
Yeah, over 1,000.
Over 1,000 IEPs reviewed in partnership with our team, and with principals. That's where we're tracking. We anticipate it's much more than that because there's a ripple effect that starts to happen. When you start to identify strengths as well as areas of need, you can't unsee that if we're really improvement focused and strategy focused, solutions oriented. And so that's what we're hearing in a real vulnerable place from our team members. And then we're likewise working with team members when they're making some of that random selection to see if perhaps they can pull something that's upcoming for a student's meeting and perhaps remedy and strengthen for a future state prior to implementation.
And one of the pieces that we also heard is that, yes, it's an evaluative tool, but it's also a formative tool because we've heard that teachers are, and we've seen teachers using the tool to help craft the IEP, right? So I'm not just waiting to have my IEP evaluated. I'm actually using it formatively to develop the IEP. And these are the specific components that I know I need to have in my IEP to have a quality IEP.
Okay, thank you. And then in terms of actually implementing, tracking the implementation of what's in the IEP, that's something that I've always worried about or thought about because when you think about the staffing allocation is typically done, my understanding is by the number of students with IEPs and not necessarily by what is required, like what services are required by the IEP. Is that correct, or can you maybe?
Yeah, I think that would have been correct probably in 2022. We've made some real improvements in that area. I'm not going to say that really started when we worked with Dr. Francis Stetson and sent everyone through step by step, which is more about what they called student-centered staffing. So sometimes there's some misunderstanding. So yes, we have some basic ratios that are put into place when there is the what are called projections for a budget. I'm not trying to educate the whole community, but those projections for a budget. But then we have built in for the last 2 years now, not only training for all of our team members on step by step, but then sitting down we've had technical assistance days provided by consultants in partnership with our team, where they actually sit down and build schedules and see how we can best meet the needs of the students, depending upon the minutes, the instructional setting, the delivery of services, et cetera. And so it becomes much more tailored. It also becomes much more creative because that's how you start to erode perceptions of specific programs are connected to this, a disability or otherwise. And really what it starts to do is expand the understanding of how do we provide appropriate service delivery for students with the available staff, and when that is not appropriate for the needs of the students, how do we fortify that appropriately? And so, I never want to speak in absolutes. I want to acknowledge we always are growing in that process, but that is really something that we invested quite a bit. Certainly under this administration and you all, when I came, we came and sort of on board together on that section, and have continued that process through this year as well. So. Yeah, that's really how things have been addressed. If someone feels differently from their own personal experience, that's really important that the IEP team which is the ARD committee. Texas is the only state that calls it the ARD team. It's an IEP team in every other state, but that's okay. We do things bigger and differently here, and I've gotten used to that in the last 35 years of being a Texan. But nevertheless, that's a real important place for those questions to be asked and to see. And it's also an important place for us to build understanding because there's not a one size fits all. There's not like programming or everything that's one size fits. It's really IEP developed. So I don't know if that answered the question entirely, but the nod of my superintendent tells me that's enough, so I'm good.
Thank you. Okay.
Before you all finish your tenure and career, you'll be able to read it too and figure it out when he gives you the look, so thank you.
Thank you. Trustees, any other questions? No? Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. So our last report tonight is our annual update on our hub goals. This does not count towards our time on student outcomes. And we have scheduled 20 minutes for tonight's discussion. So, Mr. Segura, would you please introduce the next item?
Thank you, President Singh and Board of Trustees. I'd like to welcome up Danita Caldwell, Executive Director of the Economic Opportunity Office, to join us and answer any questions you may have on the Economic Opportunity Office Hub Goals review. For our public, this was a recorded video presentation that was available prior to the meeting and can be viewed online in Board Docs under Agenda Item 5.2. And so we are available to answer any questions that you may have.
Y'all have any questions? I do have a question about how we are tracking how our bigger vendors are meeting the hub requirements that they include in their proposals to us. How do we loop back to see if at the end of the project they actually did fulfill their hub goals?
Good evening, Board of Trustees, President Singh, Superintendent Segura. Thank you so much for the opportunity to answer your questions. So our team monitors and tracks payments that are submitted on a monthly basis. And so we do have touch points from that perspective. And if we see any outliers along the way, we will reach out to those general contractors and have a conversation. We collaborate closely with our project managers on the construction management team as well. And we are currently working on building in some, I guess, accountability there in terms of what that looks like at the end of a project in terms of their overall performance working with hubs.
And then is that publicly, like, is that information available to us? Like, okay, these vendors, like, do we score them somehow or like somehow rate them to see how in compliance they are?
So I think this is where Danita can certainly shed light, but the way that the process works is if we have a large general contractor, a prime, for instance, like the prime that is going to, build Travis Early College High School. At the time that we identify them as the partner, what they provide to Austin ISD is a hub strategy and approach. And the reason being is because there are going to be dozens and dozens and dozens of partners along the way, and many of them have not been identified yet because the bidding process hasn't occurred. And so, as Danita said, as payments come up, we're tracking and making sure that they're meeting the intent of the approach. And then Danita and her team work with the designers and work with the general contractors to make adjustments along the way if appropriate. I think the challenge we have is as part of the evaluation in the procurement process, we evaluate their approach and their strategy to implement. But because these projects are years long and there's hundreds and hundreds of projects, you don't always know until you're further along in the process as to where you are. And again, these are program goals, so not every contractor for every project is going to meet all the percentages, right? That's not possible because sometimes you don't have vendors that have that skills, that have that expertise or that trade offering in that area, and that's consistent with really small projects as well. You might have a flooring project and maybe no one in that space that actually is identified as a historically underutilized business. So there's the evaluation process, yes, it's early on. The tracking process is through the payment process, and then we adjust. And then at the end, we provide reports both to the CBOC along the way. I guess the question for the board purpose, are you maybe asking about getting updates throughout the program? We provide them to the CBOC.
I mean, it's helpful to know if we're on track, if that is something that, when we put out an RFP, we expect something and then people can say whatever they, put in whatever they want, with the intent that they fulfill it. But I just want to make sure that we're closing that loop. And if there are vendors that consistently are not meeting their goals, is that somehow noted to us, or is that taken into account when they come back for a new project that they're bidding on? And how does that, is that part of the scoring criteria for future things that they're bidding on?
And so one of the things that we have implemented in terms of transparency and greater accountability, especially with our modernization projects, is building in our good faith efforts process to identify hub firms and the overall tracking with construction management. And so what that does is we are included in the review, where in the 2017 bond, we were didn't have visibility into the actual subs that they were selecting, why they did not actually select certain subs over others, non-hubs versus hubs. And so now we're actually able to take exception if we see that, you know, there's an issue there. So that's huge for our team to have eyes at that level and to really work with our project managers. I think we are there's an opportunity there for us to build out more of a evaluation process overall at the end of the project, to your point.
Thank you. Yes.
It's really short, just a quick question, probably yes or no. Are you familiar with the city of Austin's Meet the Prime?
Yes.
Okay, does AISD not do something like that?
We participate in those events that are hosted by the city and other entities, and we are establishing our own. We're going to be hosting that in February of next year.
Okay, where, for, I guess, quick explanation, where prime contractors, the biggies, are here, and then all of the subs who would normally have to fight to get the attention are placed in the same place, and they get to, it helps them, I feel, better meet their goals. Because like Trustee Singh pointed out, everybody has I have the intention to lose 50 pounds. That hasn't happened, but it is my intention, right? So my question is how long, to back up on her question, how long do we keep partnering with people who aren't meeting those goals, right? We wouldn't ask a teacher to come in and they don't meet expectations and we just, oh, look, you can just keep teaching kids. You know, you're not doing nothing we're asking you to do, but just keep coming to work, we pay you. We wouldn't do that. So, but we seem to continue to do that with our, and I mean, there's so many. This is a big city and it's being built all the time. And I really think I know that the expectation that we have, right, should be that we want to meet those goals and we want to work with people who want to meet those goals. If they don't meet those goals, maybe we shouldn't be working with those people. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I would like Danita to maybe talk and speak to kind of the overall strength of the program. You know, I've met with lots of superintendents, lots of cities, lots of municipalities. Our program is a very strong program, and we exceed our goals continuously on professional services. Certainly there's opportunities in subcategories for construction. But I don't know, Danita, I think it'd be helpful to speak to that. And I also want to kind of reinforce it. These are program goals, and it's going to be very difficult to hit every goal on every project. For us, it's the $2 billion, right? That's really the overall target. And as Danita mentioned, we have made adjustments to add teeth into the program to hold our general contractors and partners accountable further along in the process. But these are goals. I don't know, Danita, if you want to speak to the strength of the overall program. It's nothing to be proud of. I just want to make sure that it doesn't get lost.
Yes, there's a lot of positives happening with our program. We have a very robust program, and one of the things that we did was establish an economic impact analysis, which actually shows the total impact of our program, other than just, you know, how many hub firms are we doing business with. We're able to see how many jobs we've created in our community as a result to partnering with these hubs, how many, you know, the revenue generation that's come out of working with our hubs within the district. And as Matthias mentioned, you know, we continuously perform very well in our professional services. There are some areas within construction that are very strong. We do know the areas where we need to improve specifically, but there are some positive things happening as well.
Yeah, it certainly. Thank you. Yeah, I have heard a lot, so I don't want to sound like.
I just say there's a lot of really good things happening.
Yeah, so it's good, but and you know, as I think I appreciate the executive summary that was added to here. And I would just encourage folks to take a look at that, because that kind of summarizes where we are, and it does show, you know, some of the really good things that we've done. I did notice in the 2017 bond, we met the like our top 5 general subcontractors did meet the goal for WBE. What is
yes,
that?
women-owned businesses. WBE.
Okay, women-owned businesses. That's a category that does not include minority women, but that none of the ethnic sub-goals are being met, and that was from the 2017 bond. And so I was curious to know, is that like typical, or is that something that we should be alarmed about?
For 27, go ahead.
In our case, we have very large projects with our modernization, and it is difficult for our hubs to scale to the extent of, working on any of our projects as general contractors or prime firms. And so to that extent, it could be a challenge presented there. We have seen a lot of competition in the marketplace. There are constructions happening everywhere. And so there's a lot of opportunity for these vendors in terms of competing for work across the city. And so we're seeing that as well. So I can say that that's part of the issue, but we do have the opportunity to improve on that with the 2022 bond.
I think the only thing that I would add is one of the ways that you can adjust the program is by making it easier for hub firms to participate in smaller projects, which is one of the strategies that Danny and our team have employed, because it can be challenging, and ultimately, we are help facilitating, but the contract is owned by the general contractor or the lead design firm. But where maybe there aren't enough hub partners in that space, what we can do is actually break down the projects. And so the hundreds and hundreds of other small projects that occur through our campuses, you look at those, which are not usually the larger projects, you would see those numbers move in the opposite direction. And again, it's program-wide.
Well, it's pretty evident that you guys are responding, like you're using the lessons learned and you're continuously improving, from what I can see in this presentation. So I appreciate that. Yes.
Thank you for this. I have one quick question. In an earlier update to us, you had shared some of the capacity building that's happening, which sounded really innovative and sounded like good things were happening. I would just love an update on what's happened since the last time you spoke with us about that, and whether you feel like it's making a dent and a difference.
Thank you for the question. We're still early on in terms of, it's a process. And so I think we're moving in the right direction in terms of the capacity building and really connecting our hub partners to resources that they can use for that. So a little early on for me to give you a definitive, but we are moving in the right direction now with that.
Great, thank you, and we'll see you again in a year. So it'll be exciting to hear where it's led. Thank you for all of this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. So, I'll move on. Thank you so much, Ms. Haldwell, appreciate it. Okay, so this ends the section on the information reports from the administration. At this time, we will now move into the preview of the agenda items that will be considered for a vote at the next regular board meeting on Thursday, November 21st. AISD staff is available to answer any questions for tonight's preview. So we will begin tonight with item 7, which is the agenda preview for upcoming academics and curriculum items. Trustees, are there any questions on this item? Any questions? 7.1. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I was watching from the back for a moment. 7.1, so this should be the item on the inclusion of a new course. Yeah, Logic 1 and Logic 2. And I really appreciate in our backup materials questions by Trustee Hunter on this issue, or on the inclusion of this. Oh, hi. On the inclusion of, or the introduction of these courses. Where I'm trying to get a deeper understanding is about the living into something that the board has talked about in workshops, which is excellence and opportunity for all students sort of across the board. And we have equality issues, we have equity issues, and then we try to move towards excellence. Help me understand why we have, and by the way, I love the inclusion of courses on logic, on critical thinking, on, or let's call it analytical thinking, identification of logical fallacies, all that sort of stuff. I absolutely love that. And I'm seeing the introduction of a course or into one set of schools and not other sets of schools. And I'm at a point sort of in my 3 decades kind of watching this that always raises my eyebrows. So could you talk a little bit about the whys of having these courses in these schools? Why not everywhere? And what are they doing in particular for us?
Yes, good evening. Thank you, board members and President Singh and Superintendent Segura, sorry. So the reason why these classes have been targeted for these two campuses is because early on in the year, in the summer, before the school year began, I started having conversations with both our single gender schools, Sadler Means and Gus Garcia, and they told me about things that had been promised to them in the past by past administrations before I was here. And it really spoke to me that they're both beautiful campuses and have many things going on, but they're struggling with enrollment. I know that we talk a lot about, so I know exactly what you're saying, but also I think that it is important to give our campuses that are unique in this manner something that can draw more students to them. So we started in the summer, again, trying to come up with different ideas of how we could draw more enrollment to the campuses. So what we're trying to do is think of innovative ways to make the campuses attract more students to the campuses. So because I have also wrestled with this idea of, yes, it is a great course and it could be offered at every middle school, but the intention of putting these courses on to one or two of the campuses in particular is to give them something that they can highlight and make them unique and stand out and draw students to them. Again, this is not the only thing that we're thinking through, but it was one of the first ideas that we had. We also have an idea of partnering with the Buck Institute and doing more with project-based learning. So I'm working with the Office of Innovation to try and secure funding so we can get the teachers trained in that. So this will be an ongoing series of conversations. So, of course, I love the idea of opening it up to everyone, which may be something that we do further down the road, but at this moment, the purpose of trying to keep these courses for either Gus Garcia or both Garcia and Sadler Means is really to give them something that can help them stand out and be, they stand out already because they're exceptional schools, but in order to give them something unique that would draw more students to them.
And the only thing I would add to that is, 6 weeks ago when this came up, we had conversations. I've since met with Principal Roby and Principal Mejia, and certainly want to acknowledge that we're trying to find tailored solutions. And after speaking with the leaders of those campuses, I have a clear understanding of kind of which campus would kind of prefer to be the maybe starting point. And so I think at this point, what we have is a course that is desired at one, and perhaps an opportunity to explore other courses at another campus. And so, and in the recommendation, ultimately, we made that adjustment. We didn't make it in the abstract, so we'll correct for that. But the goal here, ultimately, is to work with our leaders at our campuses to figure out kind of how to best serve their students, make sure that they can attract students that, fit with the school and can go on and do incredible things. And so this is an attempt to do that. And we can make adjustments if needed. But right now, it doesn't also necessarily mean that it will be implemented at their school, which is an important point as well.
So is there a limit so the implications of this vote are that this kind of puts this opportunity onto the books for us?
Yes.
Correct.
Correct. So the reason why we're asking for this kind of early on in the year is because it'll have to, we'll have to add it into the system and the SIS and the course catalog, and there are other things that need to happen. We're going to have to write curriculum for it alongside with the campus. So again, we looked at all the list of innovative courses together with both campuses, and initially, we had thought that this one was the most attractive for many reasons. A lot of it because of the critical thinking and the speaking piece of it, the public speaking piece, which I'm not doing very well tonight. Sorry. So we just wanted to have this as an option in our back pocket if it's something that the campuses feel like, yes, this fits in our overall strategy, but we had to do it soon because there are a lot of implications, such as writing curriculum and finding the right person to teach the course. The other great thing about this course is that anybody can teach it. So a lot of the innovative courses had restrictions on who could teach the course. So this one basically said, it had like 10 different certifications you could have in order to teach the course. So that was another thing about it. We like the critical thinking piece, we like the public speaking piece, the debate, the logical fallacies, all things that we think will prepare kids for any kind of AP or advanced courses in their future. And again, just how much flexibility there was in the course. But we are also exploring other options that are in the innovative courses that TEA has provided to us. But this was the one initially that we hit on, thinking that it would fit well. For sure at Gus Garcia and possibly at Sadler Means if she chooses to onboard the course.
Okay, and I guess I want to assure the President I've reached out and received permission from agents of the state to ask about this, and the feedback I received was that any item that we vote on, we should be clear about before we vote. So, received permission from the state. So, when something goes into our catalog or our inventory, this names these two schools. Does it go into the inventory everywhere, or is that as a separate process?
We can restrict where it goes. So we can for.
Well, why would you, I guess?
So again, the reason
because of the theory of action around enrollment.
Right.
Got it.
And
Got
so
it.
I do think it's something, a few years down the road, if everybody thinks that it's a great idea and also wants to offer it, we have that option. But the idea is what we're looking for right now is to fulfill a promise to those two campuses, which I feel obligated to do. And to find solutions for them that are unique to their campuses. So if I gave it to everybody, then I'm not really, it is about equity, right? And sometimes we have to put more resources into the places that could benefit from having more resources. So, that's kind of the mind frame that I'm looking into this. Course, I think it is a great couple of courses, and I think that all kids would benefit from it, but that's not what the mission is right now that I'm working on with these two campuses.
Understood. That's helpful for me, especially understanding the nuance that this is a door open and that there will be ongoing conversation about how it plays out in the end. So that was very helpful. Thank you, President. Thank you, and thank you, President.
Of course, thank you. All right, so next we are going to, let's see, we talked about that. Okay, next agenda preview item, number 8, on board administration. Any questions there? Yes. Oh, yes.
Yes. So on item 8.1, I had asked this by board tracker, but I wanted to ask it publicly. The approval for a runoff election, which we are now facing a runoff election for one of our trustee seats, has a blank on the estimated cost. And I wonder when we'll receive an update on what the estimated cost for the runoff election will be.
Yep, and so we don't know the entire cost because we don't know who will be part of the runoff currently. We know that we will have a runoff election. We are waiting to determine the final tally of votes for all of the city elections. So once we call an election, whoever is in that splits the cost based off of the number of voting locations you have.
Okay.
So for instance, if the city of Austin also has a runoff, we'll split it with them. Once we know that, we'll be able to put in a new cost. We will have it before you vote on it.
Okay. And I'm not going to ask you to say the estimated cost publicly because it's an obscene amount of money, but I wanted to ask, I was reviewing policy BBB, legal and local, around board elections, and I would just want to request that the board policy committee, we put that on our agenda, to review BBB, to explore both the pros and cons of shifting to a plurality instead of a majority to avoid future runoffs, and then also to compare the possible cost savings by going with plurality instead of majority. So if we can just put that on the board policy agenda.
Thank you. All right, the next section.
Also, I mean, one thing that I think is worth sharing is if there are other entities that have elections that intersect our area, then we also do an offset of that sharing for those specific locations. So there's a lot that goes into it.
Okay, the next section is 9, business and finance. Trustees, are there any questions on these items?
Yes, Jacob. Superintendent Segura, on the district financial audit, I just wanted to ask, first of all, what the timeline is for the indicated video presentation that will be part of that?
So the video presentation will be included on the voting meeting agenda. It'll be available to trustees tomorrow.
Okay, great. And I just want to, again, ask publicly that my reading of the presentation slides is that there were no significant findings, which in layman's terms mean that the audit reflects the district's efficient management of finances.
Yes, and we have our audit partner, Lupe, here, if you have any specific questions for him as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's just the clean bill of health is what I want to highlight, because we heard a lot in the last few months from people making accusations and unfounded claims of the mismanagement of funds and the waste and abuse of our budget process in the district. And I just want to, we've pointed to several pieces of evidence here of the efficient and effective management of funds in our district. And I just want to highlight this piece publicly.
And so I think it'd be helpful to have our auditor actually say that opposed to our interim CFO, but very briefly.
Sure. Good evening, trustees. Yes, so we started the financial statement audit back in the spring. We've been in communication with the district over all these months, pretty regularly, getting through all the audit procedures of the district's financial statements. The opinion we've expressed, the opinion that the district, in fact, has earned on its financial statements is an unmodified opinion. So that means that the financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects. The district does have a fund balance policy, and you are meeting and exceeding your fund balance in the general fund for the fiscal year, meaning you've managed your resources appropriately in accordance with board policy to take the appropriate amount of fund balance in fiscal year 2025.
I wouldn't dream of offering advice to our administration, but I would love to see this publicized in one of our communications to the community. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do have one quick question also, not about the audit. So sorry, but it is about finances. So sorry. Very quick on the budget development calendar, and you don't even need to be up here, Ms. Montgomery. You're fine. I just wanted to ask the superintendent actually I thank you for putting some amendments to the budget development calendar. I did want to point out that not everybody might understand what we mean when we say share realignment plan at board information session, which is happening in December, I believe. But that's basically the budget reduction plan.
Correct. So we think we shared in a previous presentation as well as with our ad hoc committee that we are going to be presenting a implementation strategy and plan that's a cost reduction strategy plan over a 3-year period. And so that's what we're going to be presenting in that line item.
Okay, great. And so that's, for people who are here, so that's row 31. And that would be happening in, I'm sorry, I don't have my screen together. It says that's happening in November?
So there are two things that are happening. One is the introduction to get initial feedback from the trustees in those items that require board vote. Perhaps it's a policy change or some support that's required, then that'll go to the December board meeting.
Okay, so this will have, so we'll get this, and I would like to ask if you can call it a reduction plan, because that's
fine.
probably more accurate. So that's gonna happen at our voting meeting in November.
Correct.
Okay.
The
The
introduction, correct, yeah.
Okay,
There's no action
perfect.
required.
Okay, no action required, that's helpful. And then I also noticed, and appreciate the addition of row 46, which is the teacher outreach and engagement for budget priorities. And I noticed that the months are January, February. Is that when we plan to finish it by, or is that when we start it?
So begin and finish. So it's implementation, sorry. So one of the things we didn't want to do is add specific milestones, because whenever we engage, we are very fluid with our community, with our staff. Adjustments occur all the time. And so we provided a range. So the beginning and completion of those would occur in that time period. And so that's why it's stated in that way.
And so would the board be expected to vote on a budget reduction strategy, say in December, before teacher engagement occurs?
So there are different parts of, so I think in December where it's a bigger level, higher level strategy and plan. Some engagement will occur before that, not all of it. A lot of the engagement that we need to have completed is also around implementation.
Okay.
And so, I think we can talk about kind of how much can be done before and how much will be done during, because remember, it's a 3-year plan. So there are things in year 2 and 3 which we're not going to be able to even get any engagement on, except for the fact that it's an idea that we're wanting to explore and pursue further. And so, maybe that's something we can provide more clarity on, and kind of the sequence of the number of meetings that would occur before that recommendation in December. Maybe that'll be helpful, so we can kind of show how it's broken up across the milestones.
Yeah, I think it would be, if there's going to be teacher engagement, or if there's going to be an expectation of a board vote on anything related to a bigger budget plan. I don't know if other trustees feel this, but I would like to know the findings of teacher engagement before that happens. Yes, I see some nods. Trustees, is that something y'all would be interested in? Okay. All right. Trustee Zapata, did you have something to add?
So would that mean there would be potential change to do that first?
So I think we all need, I think the thing that I would want to be very, I guess maybe communicate to the board is, again, we're trying to stay farthest away from the classroom initially. And so I think the way that we're going to structure it, and which you'll see in November, are a lot of those adjustments coming that will certainly benefit from teacher input, but won't have as big of an impact because they're going to be central or more kind of operationally focused. So we're really, there's a lot going on in my head. I'm trying to balance this out, but the things that are going to be a little further out are the ones that are going to require more input. So we're trying to be very strategic about how we engage and make sure that we're actually incorporating the input to inform the plan. So let me get with the team and maybe provide some additional detail, but I don't think at this point we need to make any adjustments on the timeline. What I can do is provide additional feedback on when some of the interim milestones will be executed.
Thank you. Trustee Zapata.
No, that makes sense, because, I don't want to hold up moving forward if it's not going to really make an impact on changing what's already going to be proposed.
Yes, and we also want, yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Okay, all right, next is section 10, facilities. So please note that the administration is moving item 10.5, approval of an MOU with United Way, to December. This will not be at our voting meeting in 2 weeks. So trustees, do you have any questions about these items?
One question for the superintendent. On I believe it's 10.3, 10.3 on the sale of 3 acres. I just wanted to ask, In the past, I think we've had attached like documentation with like a map and kind of showing where that property is. Is that available to us? To show like where that property is or to kind of,
So we can.
I
think
don't
we
want
did-
anything created, but if there's something.
No,
that
we did
exists-
it as part of the identification of surplus. And so what I can do is go back and pull that attachment and then pull it into the backup.
Oh, it's an old one. Okay, yeah. I mean, if we just have that as an attachment so people can see it.
Yeah.
And, okay. And in that description that was in there, it talks about it being a very interesting historical site in terms of the history of AISD and the annexation of other districts. Is there any concern that that property has a historical designation or could?
Here, come on.
Yeah, come on.
Good evening, Board Trustees, Superintendent Segura. This is Christine Steenport, the Chief Operations. So because this location is outside the city limits, there is no historic preservation and it cannot zone as historic.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, of course.
Thank you. All right. So we will now move on to Section 11, Talent Strategy. Trustees, are there any questions on these items? Okay, well, thank you. So this will end our regular agenda preview. We will now recess the open meeting at 9:03 p.m. and move to the executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Sections 551.074, 551.072, 551.073, 551.087, 551.076, 551.0821, and 551.071. When we are finished with the executive session, we will briefly return to the open session to formally adjourn the meeting. The adjournment will be recorded and be included in all replays of tonight's meeting. So thank you all for joining us and have a great evening. All right, so we will now reconvene the open meeting at 10:56 p.m. Secretary Boswell, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Having a motion by Secretary Boswell and a second by Trustee Sabata to adjourn. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. The motion passes unanimously. The meeting is adjourned at 10:57 p.m. Thank you.